we will go on from there. The first thing I am going to do is cover what's on this part of the presentation. We bring this up and bring up slideshow from the beginning. This is, of course, weathering with Pan Pastels, and it's more than just Pan Pastels now. It's Pan Pastels and washes. Myself and Walt Lyles will be teaching it, and this is, of course, training camp on May 29th, 2021. Welcome. Pan pastels are professional artist dry pigments in a really interesting pan format. And they look like this when they're all sealed and covered up. When they're unsealed and uncovered, they look like this. And there's a variety of colors in here. And we're going to look at this variety of colors today when we're working in the class. But these colors are what we end up using to weather our model railroad equipment and buildings and all kinds of stuff. I weather track with it. They're available as complete weathering sets or as individual pancake pans. You can mix them, you can layer them, and you apply them dry, making them ideal for realistic weathering effects in seconds. I've also discovered when I was working at the British region that we can apply them over wet material, and I will show you that when we get into weathering truck side frames. This is the material from the Pan Pastels folks, and they do have weathering sets, and it talks about the tools that they have. It talks about the weathering color sets that they have, and you can buy those sets like that from hobby shops and manufacturers and suppliers. I mean, not manufacturers, but suppliers. You can also go to places like Dick Blick and buy the individual colors if you want them. And when I was in my local hobby store the other day, I looked and they had individual colors. They didn't have any of the sets, but they had a fair number of the different individual colors, which is nice. They're compatible with spray fixatives like Tester's Dull Coat, although I no longer use Tester's Dull Coat. The PDF that I sent out to you shows what I use currently. I either use Tymea Flat Finish or I use Mr. Hobby's Flat Finish. Both are, in my opinion, superior to Tester's Dull Coat because the texture of and I say pigment, and it's true, it's just a clear pigment and a flat variety, but the texture of the pigment in Testers and Mr. Hobby paints is far superior to the texture of the Testers Dull Coat. So I don't use Testers Dull Coat anymore. They can be applied with flexible, reusable, easy to clean, non-abrasive, soft sponges, cosmetic applicators, and I have examples of those to show you when we're working. And you can cut them down or reapply. You can cut them down or do stuff with them and decorate them or trim them, whatever, to get into cracks and crevices. And using washes also makes things easier in certain instances, and I'll show you that today. These are cosmetic applicators, and I'll show you the package that those came from. These are the soft sponges that the Pan Pastels people produce in different shapes, and they're also handy, and I'll show you those. These are the small applicators that they use, and the tip, you can buy the tips, and the tips go over the spatula or the knife blade, and you use those to reach into small areas like under running boards and stuff like that. The same sort of thing can be said for the applicators. These are these cosmetic wedges and applicators. They're foam, not Q-tips. The one thing I did discover about these ones from Publix that you need to be aware of is that the ones that I got from Publix were infused with vitamin E. And the vitamin E needs to be washed out because otherwise you'll end up with oily railroad cars, and that would really look bad. And I don't think the Pan Pastels would apply well. And I pulled them out of the package and I could feel it. So what I ended up doing was I pulled them out of the package, dumped them into a pan of warm soapy water, squished and flexed and kind of scrubbed them and played with them for a while, rinsed them out in lots of nice clean water, put them on a cookie sheet in my oven I just turned the oven on to 100 degrees, let it warm up, turned it off, stuck them in to the oven so they wouldn't melt. Not anything above 100 degrees, so that was fine. And as the oven cooled, they dried and they were perfect. Okay, we'll start by looking at weathering a freight car. And I'm happy. I'm lucky because I model today. If you model yesterday, um, what is in this what's in this slide right now will have great impact or great importance to you. It's nice to have color photographs of whatever it is, and you can see them in books like by Morning Sun and other places. So if you go look in a book like this, and you go look for a car, the car that you're looking for, if you model, say, for example, the New York Central, then you find something that looks like this weathered, fairly heavily weathered and faded boxcar. That means, and for me, I go to places like this because railroadpicturearchives.net has lots of pictures of suitable cars that I use for weathering. And so when I sit down to weather a car, I will pull out my cell phone or my tablet, go plug in the reporting marks for the car that I'm looking for and weather it from there because I'll find stuff that looks like this. And this is from railroadpictures.net. And this is a T-box boxcar, and I have something similar to it. Let's see, just from a
double door.
Yeah, and they're both double doors.
65 footer.
But yeah, from probably a similar numbering scheme. It's the same type of car, just as a different number, but that's okay. If we can find stuff like this, then we're much better off. When weathering freight cars, there's some easy steps. First, you start with a car, and this will be like the car that was in the photograph that was in the book. Remove the trucks and couplers from the car body, separate the wheels and axles from the truck side frames. You don't have to do that. It's nice, but you don't have to. But you start with something that looks like this. With the wheels and trucks separated, use a spray can or airbrush to apply a light coat of flat finish to the entire car. And I have found, as I said in the email that I sent out initially, this flat finish is probably the most important thing you can do to start a car out. And with a flat finish applied, really you don't need to do anything after that to fix your Pan Pastels in place, because the Pan Pastels themselves have tooth and they will bind themselves to the flat finish that you apply to a car or to a building. And I found once I do that, I can remove the Pan Pastels, but I have to thoroughly wash the car under running water with a good dish soap. So normal handling of a car won't really affect it. Now, if you belong to a modular group and you regularly pick up and put down the same dozen cars, you might want to put another coat of a flat finish over your car when you're done with your weathering. But for most operations on a home layout, there's no need at all. I don't like Tester's flat finish anymore. I've already talked about that. I've sent out in the PDF that showed the materials that we use that I much prefer Tamiya flat finish or Mr. Hobby flat finish, and there's pictures of that. Brush paint the wheel faces some kind of a nice dark brown color. I need to redo the ones that I just did because they look weird. I didn't used to do this, but I do now. I've come up with a slightly different method to paint the brush side frames, and I'll show you why and what I use. This works, and it works just fine to paint the wheel sets. So you have something where here is a blackened wheel set, but here is a painted wheel set, and the darker brown color really does look much nicer. This darker color for the truck side frame, I've actually replaced with something a little bit easier to do. It does make it look this kind of a gray, grimy color, but I'll show you what I do now and what I experimented with and practiced on at the British region when I did weathering. So now you end up with your trucks weathered, your car ready to be weathered. Once that's done, you put the trucks back on so that you have some place to stick your car so you can work on the weathering. In real world, weathering is a gradual process in layers. And less can become more. But like I said, once you have a flat finish on your car and you start to apply Pan Pastels, if you get way too much, you can remove it, but it's you can remove it, but it's a little bit hard. So build it up in layers like the real world does, and that's much easier. Okay. A light coat of a contrasting Pan Pastel color to the roof panels, simulating where time and weather has worn off paint. And it doesn't take a lot to do this. Just skim the applicator across the pigment and then work on the car. In this case, with running boards in the way, using a smaller flat brush works. For a full width roof, like you'll see that we're working on, at least on boxed cars, you can use a sponge, and we'll take a look at that. Then using a color that most closely matches the roof, in this case something red oxide, apply a second layer, and you add darkening to it. So we're starting with the lighter colors, and then we're adding darker colors to it. And you can add, once you get the lighter color on, you can add a variety of layers of whatever it is that you want to. You can build up layers of rust. You can build up layers of dark grime, and you can add layers of dust on top of it, like scenery. The secret behind weathering is layers and texture. And that's what we work to simulate here using Pan Pastels. And we'll show you what it looks like. The wood roof walk on this car, and that car is next. You use it using something like Payne's Gray Tint. We've got that in there. And then blending in a light layer of black. So we added the Payne's Gray to kind of gray it down. And then down here towards this end, adding the layer of black over it to grimy it up and make it look dirty and ugly. Red iron oxide to the sides and ends of the car body, working vertically down like weathering. Lightly fade the car logo, data, and reporting marks. So you start at the top and pull down. I tend to use sponges for this on a wide swath at one time, and I'll show you where I started on my first car. But I'm using a darker color to work my way down. It simulates kind of fading. It fades out all this really bright white, which the flat finish really won't address. but we're working on fading out the brightness of all of this in a color that kind of blends in with the color of the side of the car. And as we work our way down here at this end, we can see how here this is all faded. This has been faded into the overall body color, and that's what's happening here with this. And we do the same thing to the ends of the cars, pulling from top to the bottom, and it blends everything, all the lettering that's here, to the end of the car. To add wide rust streaks to the car sides, layer on burnt sienna. Work as before, working vertically from the roof down the side sills. And that's what we see here, where rust is streaking down the side of the car, like here at the end of the door tracks. And we could find it maybe here at the ends of the roof walks where hardware. Remembering that the roof tops rust, and that rust runs down the side of the car. Truck side frames and springs can show signs of rust, and it does not take much. Just a very little bit on the side frame of the truck and a very little bit on the springs. And then here with the journal boxes, adding some darker oil, which would look ugly and gunky. And I'll show you what I do to simulate that kind of stuff on truck side frames when we get there. Final things are like wood tack bars or tack boards on the car doors and ends, and you can use raw umber to simulate worn wood. And that's what this is, a little bit of this raw umber applied to the tack board, fades it out and gunkies it up. And then you could add, and you could also, if you were really interested in it, I guess you could simulate the remains of something tacked to the tack board, maybe with tissue paper. That's what it looks like after the car is finished. Like I've said, you can protect the work with a very light coat of dull coat or something else. You don't need to do that, but you can. And you go from an unweathered car to a weathered car. And I like the car. It looks good. It's not beat to death, but in comparison to the way it was when it started to here, that really looks good. Okay. And we can do the same sorts of things with other cars. And these are some examples of pictures of things that I did prior to the British region Pan Pastels clinic, and we'll go through these steps here. Walt and I will go through steps like this here. Here's a faded, and it's not a rusted yet, but a faded out and ready for the real world rail car truck. And then here's the car itself faded out and some gunk and grime on it, riding on its now faded out and rusted out trucks. And it's an improvement. Here's another car and a different example. Here is one of those T-box box cars with stuff running down the sides of the car from at the ends of the roof tracks, stuff collecting here on the underneath the short ladders at the ends of the car, with the trucks that now no longer disappear underneath the car because there's some color applied to them and they now stick out a little bit better. Because if you look at real railroad cars, the trucks are not completely a complete flat black. They actually look, there's actually something there behind them. So that's an improvement. Here's another example of one that's been grimed up and faded out and so on and so forth and such like. And here's another example. Structures, you can do the same sorts of things. Here is a water tower that's all been painted nicely ready. You do the same sort of thing, apply a flat finish to it. Then red oxide shade to simulate light rust. So off we go. We start applying rust to the side of the car, parallel to the panel lines, starting at the top and working down. If you want to tone down the rust effect, you can apply a light layer of black. So again, starting at the top, working down, parallel to the panel lines for all of this, you apply the black streaks going down over where the rust already was. As pointed out in here, over time, in this case on the water tower, the alkaline water leaches out deposits through the seams in the tank's sides. Seepage can be easily simulated with titanium white, and I really like the effect. It starts at the panel line, runs vertically down, and fades out as you work your way down. You can do the same thing to the roof of the water tank. So when you're done here, you can see where the seepage down the side of the car. And the nice thing is using the Pan Pastels, if you do this and then it looks a little bit too bright to you, you can always get some kind of a shading color, a black or a gray, and run it very lightly down the outside of that, and that'll blend it in. There are also blending Pan Pastels. And the purpose behind those is to, and I've got examples of those, we've got examples of those sitting in our palettes today. If you have too much of some color in one spot, you can use the blending color, which doesn't really add color, to blend neighboring colors of Pan Pastels together, and it works well. And I've got a brick building sitting on my workbench, so we'll take a look at this. Mine isn't as colorfully lettered, but that's because of where it's going to go when it's ready. But in this case, this ice and cold storage company soot to the brick chimney using black, which is what you see here. A little bit of black down the sides, and if you looked up at the top of it, across the top of it, because soot would accumulate on the chimney. Brick dust and rust from the corrugated metal panels using oxide red, so we can see where brick dust and rust from the metal overhang will start to accumulate and run down the top of the metal overhang, like you would see running down the side here, and then down the face or down the top of this overhang, this sheet metal overhang. Vertical strengthening caused by on brick surfaces, you can simulate using red iron oxide dark and work it down the sides of the building vertically, parallel to the cornices, and running down, especially starting underneath things like these little brick overhangs, the brick windowsill overhangs, running down here and here, the same thing down here. And continuing down the face of the building, you can see close up here. Toning down the faded, the white lettering by an application, a light application of black, will blend the really bright white lettering into the black background and not make it look quite so stark. So you can see here where a very light application of the black running vertically down over the E here is blending the E into the rest of the sign. A really interesting effect that Peter Youngblood did this, and I'll be honest, and he's not here to defend himself, so that's okay. One of the effects that he talks about here, these oil stains on the driveway in front of the gas pumps here, was a boo-boo. The gas station's concrete pad has been weathered with black, followed by isopropyl alcohol puddled on with an eyedropper. And the first time he did that, I'm not sure exactly how, but it was a mistake, and it really ended up looking cool because you can see that it looks like dark puddles. The alcohol, 70% alcohol, mixed with the Pan Pastels and made it look like a pool of oil. And it really turned into a really neat effect. You can simulate tire dirt, tire grind across it, but then once you're done, adding the little drops of alcohol where a car would park in front of the gas pumps really was a neat effect. If your freight roster includes hopper cars with coal loads, there is a shiny version there is a pearl medium black version of Pan Pastels. And you can highlight, use a sponge and run that across the top of the coal load, and it really looks good. You can use a coarser version of it for O and S scales, fine for N and Z scales, HO scale. I think I'm using fine, but it really adds sparkle to the coal in your coal loads. And I've done that to every one of the open hoppers running coal on my railroad, and the pictures don't do it justice, but the actual but looking at it really does. We're going to end this part of the presentation and actually get to work, so I'm going to stop sharing. And we have more people in by now. That's excellent. We're going to stop sharing and go back to work over here. So, earlier I did paint these wheel sets kind of a gray color, and I don't like it. It's going to get redone. It may get redone with a wash or something.
Usually rail tie brown is a good color.
Yeah, rail tie brown would be a really nice color.
Because rust, it's not really a rust. It's got a lot of grease mixed in with the road dust and everything from the ballast line. So you end up with a little bit darker color from the black grease.
I think I'm going to try something really quick.
And when I say black grease, the reason I say the black grease is that in today's modern railroad, and even the old days, the journals had the grease in them, so it would sling up on the wheels. And even today, they shoot the grease up from the rails at particular parts. So that's why there's so much grease sometimes on the underside.
Well, you might want to pick up your roll of paper towels. My Sheltie has decided to play with it. I'm redoing my wheel sets, and I'm now using something that I talked about in the
She got my paint bottle.
Shadow.
She got my paint bottle, black paint.
Shadow.
Hang on, everybody.
Where'd he go?
I don't know. He just took off my paint bottle.
Uh-oh. Let's go find him.
Okay. Come here. What'd you do with it?
He took it into the hallway. You might want to just go see it. It's probably just sitting there.
Okay.
Looking happy.
All right, you stay here with us.
Shadow.
Stay here with us. He's all right. Come on.
Troublemaker.
Sneak.
He's a troublemaker. Okay, this is much better. I'm using one of these washes that I'm going to use in another part of our presentation. It's nice to learn while you're working, because now I've got wheel sets that are darker and grimier and not just gray. Okay. So we're going to start with a process on our cars, and I've actually already picked up this car and started to work on it. This is a very colorful, and I kind of like it. I know it's older, but it's my railroad, so I'm keeping it the way I have it. And that's interesting. It's my railroad, and I'm going to use it. I just re-stenciled it and added graffiti to it, but what I did is I started on this car with just one of these makeup sponges, and it had a little bit of black left on it. So to fade out all of this really bright CN lettering on the colorful side of the car and blend the red CN lettering on this gray side of the car is I just started at the top of the car and just worked my way down the side of the car with a with a sponge with whatever it was that was left on it from the last time I did a weathering project. And because I can do this in light layers, a little at a time, I can build up as much grime as I want on the side of this car. And since this is an older car, I can add more layers to it. Turn the car around the other way, and I can build up layers on this side of the car as well. Now, this side, it doesn't appear quite as obvious because the entire side of the car is already kind of dark. But if you look at this car, yeah, there we go. If you look at this car, you can actually see the layers build up. On this side, it's maybe not quite so obvious, but if I turn the car around and show it to you here, it's far more obvious. If I pick up something like this Railbox Brox car, which is bright yellow, and I do the same thing here, fading out the side of the car, if I drag a sponge with whatever it is that's left on it down the side of the car, I can begin to fade out the entire car. I can tone it down. I can grimy it up. I can make it look yucky without a lot of difficulty and not a lot of time. It's nice because when not teaching, you can actually do a car like this in 15 minutes or less. Here's one side of the car that we've started on, and I'll add a little bit of darker gray to my sponge, and you can see where just adding a little bit to my sponge making the entire car side look relatively yucky fairly easily. And you can do the same thing to the ends of the cars until you get down to the brake gear. And then I want to show you something that I discovered that really helps rather than trying to drag sponges over it. And that's where the beginnings of washes comes in, where you pull out, and in this case I'm using panel line accent stuff by Tamiya, and this is just straight black. And the nice thing about this is it comes with its own brush in it. And if I go up to the brake gear and I just dab some of this on it and let gravity take over, I will weather out the brake gear and not worry about destroying any of it with a sponge. I can do the same thing to the etched metal crossover platforms on both ends of the car without worrying about destroying them. And the black, this black wash is really thin, so it won't fill in the grading on the crossover platform, but it will grimy it down instantly. And as it dries, it'll dry to a flat finish to go along with the rest of the car. Now, when we get ready to work in truck side frames, and I want my truck side frames to look kind of greasy, and I have this as a picture in the presentation. This AK Interactive wash is called fuel stains. And the nice thing about the fuel stains is it looks like grease because it's petroleum based and it's the right color for it. And the nice thing about this that I have discovered is if we pick up the same car that we're working with and get out a micro brush, I can dip the micro brush in here and apply this directly to the truck side frame, making my truck side frames already kind of yucky. And then while that's still wet, I can get out a sponge and pick up a little bit of a rusty color and apply that to the outside of the truck side frame and get in a couple of layers of grime and gunk on my truck side frames before I get very far. Now I will come back later and add some dust to it once it dries, because dust is dry, but I can paint, as it were, the truck side frame with the fuel stains and then fade it out and make it look even yuckier just by adding a little bit of the Pan Pastel to it while the fuel stain stuff is wet. And I'm going to just set this car aside for a bit and let that dry and then add dust over that. You want to start in on car?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll back out of the way and we'll turn it, because Walt's been doing some work on the side.
Let me see if I can get my car down here. Hopefully y'all can see this. I'm working on an Athearn gondola. Let me back up a couple steps here with it. Just so y'all know, on this car I actually used some Tester's dull coat on it earlier today to get it ready, just to give me a flatter surface. That was a fast way to do it instead of breaking out the airbrush. So, but I went ahead and got that on there. Then I used several techniques. I used the micro brush, and I dipped it in the into the Pan Pastel, and I just kind of go down the ribs of this car. Now I'm using that color, and it's kind of setting it up along the ribs, and I'm going lighter to darker as I go on the downward stroke. But the other thing I do is I go back to a black on this car, and then just kind of lightly cover up that light touch of the orange, and kind of get it. I don't want to get too much black on it, but I'm trying to give a little bit of the rust with the dirty kind of cold kind of look to it on this kind of car. And then I'm also wanting to get the rust streaks up here on the top of the top of going across the top rail. You could do a little bit more on the rail as far as getting some of the banged up or something like that at some point, but this is a good start to get it looking kind of rusty and stuff. And the reason I had to put the dull coat in is on some cars, I will say this, AccuRail makes a good car that has a really good flat finish. Athearn is starting to have basically what I call cars that are weather ready, and that will actually settle down the slickness of the car, so you can actually start applying weather materials to it. Some of the Athearn cars that come out immediately come out with the car itself will come out with, it's just a little too slick to take the application, and it wants to kind of slide off of it. So that's my primary reason for trying to get the dust effect, or the start out on the dust in the very beginning. Now another step I did, a little different than what Perry did a minute ago, if you can see here, is I went ahead and I hit the trucks with a little bit of the light rust material, and I just hit that on the trucks themselves. Now these wheels actually have a good darkening effect. There was a little tube of black, Perry, that he ran off with. And I do that. Then I come back and I use a little bit of a black or a dark gray, and I hit that on the truck itself, and it just kind of tones down the orange coloring itself on the overall truck, and that gives you a totally different appearance of that car. Now here's the side not done. As you can see, it is dulled out, but it's in a ready to go situation. And this is the side with just a little bit of weathering on it. Like Perry said, this took about 15 minutes. Now weathering is one of these things that it is definitely one of the situations where you can say, hey, you can go as far as you want to, as far as how much detail you want to do. If you wanted to get into flakiness and start doing the flakiness in the car, you would need to start applying some kind of finish with a rust color on or something like that. Now, the one thing I will do is I'm going to take one of these little pad things that Perry has, and I'm going to take that pad and I'm going to run it in the bottom and go ahead and get that color I want. Now, there is a color that I used to love to use to spray in on gondola cars, and it was actually a military color, like a gunner's a gunner steel type color, made by one of the by testers. I don't even know if they make it anymore. Everything's changed so much recently. I don't know what's really available, but it used to be a military color, and it was a gunner steel, and it looked really good on metal like that for like a burnt or scratched up old metal inside of a car. So, but that sponge very quickly can give you an effect that you're looking for. Sorry, I went the wrong way. Can give you an effect that you look for before you put your load in it or whatever. If you get run the car without the load and stuff, so it just gives you a little bit different effect. Now, one of the things I use is a product called Vallejo, and they make a model wash, and I used that on this one side of this car. I'm gonna go back and show you what I did because it actually worked very well instead of using the Pan Pastel, and I let it dry for just a little while. So I just want to show you, this is just another little technique, and I'm always about trying different things. This is one of the fun sides of the hobby, I think, of really trying to learn how to do things. You know, there's no really right or wrong. So I'm going to put a little bit of dab on this car. I'm going to drip a little bit on there, and then I'm just going to spread it out. And I'm running an up and down stroke on the car as well. I'm trying not to go horizontal. I'm just running the vertical streaks, and I'm trying to put this wash on there, and I'm getting up in the crevices and all that. But it's kind of a whitewash is what I'm trying to affect. We're giving it the faded look on the car. And be honest with you, on some cars, this may be more than adequate. It kind of gives that sun faded look that a lot of cars have, where the paint job just looks like it's been out in the sun. Now I'm not big on cars. My era of railroading is usually 1970s and 80s and early 90s. A lot of the 70s and 80s, very few cars were graffiti back then. It's amazing when I look at my old photos, and I can actually tell because some of these cars are still on the railroads today. It's amazing how long a railroad car lasts, but it's fascinating. But I can look at the cars when they were actually brand new back in the 70s and still looking good in the 80s because no one had vandalized them or put any of the graffiti on the cars. So it's kind of different how the generations have changed. And yeah, I guess it was the 1990s when we started seeing graffiti showing up on a lot of the cars, and now it's just gotten a little bit out of control. And now they're doing locomotives. They used to really never touch the locomotives. Now they're doing the locomotives as well. So kind of irritating. But
Yes.
that quick, and I just took a small brush. I just kind of did a whitewash on the car, and I'm gonna let that dry. As you can see, some of the some of the wash wants to go down to the bottom. So I just kind of hit the brush on it to kind of so it doesn't pool up and dry as a pool. Just kind of run it off with a brush like that. And so it's just a different application. It's not. It's what I was saying with Perry. We're not trying to say that there's only one way to do this and that's it, and that's the only way to do this. Weathering is a trial by error a lot of times. And what's nice is that it's kind of like art, but it's not a perfected art, and you just kind of try out things. And you, I would say, always start on the light side before you go heavy duty on something,
Yes.
and then you kind of work your way into the car and see what you like, try techniques. A lot of people forget about this, but today's cars are averaging, 25 to 50, $60 a piece. And so they're very nice cars, they're very well detailed. And so all of a sudden you grab your first car and you throw a $50 car on the workbench and you say, I'm going to weather that car. And then you want to try a new technique that you've never done. I highly encourage you to try the new technique. But a lot of times what I would do is I might try to buy, or if you have some, if you got some old cars, like some old Tyco Abatement cars that maybe didn't cost you anything, or maybe you see at a train show and or somebody gives you an old box that they decide to get out of trains and they just hand you a box of old cars. Save those. They're great for trying new applications and trying things on. And then do your technique on there to learn how to get the technique down before you try to tackle a brand new $60 or $50 car. Sometimes that might be a good technique to use. So I'm going to let that dry. And so the other thing I had working while kind of simultaneously is I have this is an Athearn brand new boxcar. It's a 50 footer. It's kind of modern. It would be more from the 1970s and 80s. This car, I'm not going to apply the whitewash, but what I did do is I have a little tube of burnt umber and kind of shake that up. And I just put a little bit on a little pallet, or I put a little bit on a paper towel. And when I mean a little bit, just a dab goes a long ways. And I use a faithful toothpick. And I'll take that and I will run that down a couple of the ribs and down where the padlocks and the tracking system runs on the car. I just put a little bit of this down in there before I actually start really weathering the car. You can also come back and you might just do a little bit of, just kind of put a dot of it in there. Just put it along somewhere. And these cars took some pretty heavy abuse on the railroads. Then you can also come back on a car like this. Seeing a silver roof was pretty much didn't last very long. The cars got faded very quickly. They did help reflect the sunlight of the car, but you can also come back and take the same process and just kind of run a streak along one of the ribs at the top of the car. Now, the other step of this is I'm kind of creating a strong accent where material is getting down in the grooves and either kind of gotten moldy or been sitting out on the tracks a while and just kind of, it looks kind of gunky in there. That's the best word I can use, gunky. So I just run that in there. Use that toothpick. You don't get a lot of paint on the toothpick, but I tell you what, it helps you get into really tight places. Just kind of run it along that groove.
That roof might be really rusted since its home road is a dock area, which means it's likely exposed to salt water.
Well, it went down to Alabama State Docks. I think this is what this one is. And so, yes, they had a big yard down there, and there was a lot of, this was used in the paper and timber industry, is what they hauled mostly out of these. But you'll see that I took that, and then immediately you can come back and you can actually apply a light dusting in there. And I turned a little wet. I turned it on the wedge side. I'm not trying to go too heavy at first. I just want to see what kind of effect I get. But you'll start to see it's really kind of shows up the way I want it to. And I'm trying to keep the area undone, but you'll start to see it. Now you can get in there and use some of this dark rust deposit, stuff like that. You can also get in there and put that in there to give it a totally different look. I'm giving it more of a dark mold type. Been sitting around, water's been sitting on the roof, not draining off, and sitting in the warm environment of down the coastline of the Gulf Coast. You're going to have a lot of humidity down there, and so it's going to be a lot of mold growing in on top of these cars and stuff like that. So it really depends where your railroad runs, where a lot of the cars sit. Even though Perry's showing you a lot of Canadian national cars, they go from one end of the country to the other. So it just depends where they go. If they're getting a lot of turns and they actually get a lot of travel time, it's totally different. If the cars are only used in a seasonal environment like grain cars used to be heavy during grain season, then they parked them a lot of times out on the yards until the grain season came back. So it just depends on what your car is actually used for and where it kind of gets stored in the off season and stuff. But that quick, you'll start to see how that roof line got rid of that little bit of. I already put dull coat on this, but you can start to see how that shininess is going away real quick. And I don't want to weather this too heavy. I just want to get enough on it. And the other thing I liked was when you look at the end of this car, you have all these grooves, and that's where a lot of rust and stuff gets built up down there. And it is hard to get that sponge in that crevice sometimes right where you want it. So that's where this little toothpick, using that little trick I just showed you, is fantastic. It gets right up in this thing.
Or something like this would do the same sort of thing.
Do the same kind of thing, yeah.
The panel line accent color, you might then want to look at something like this is a dark gray, and you might want to apply it underneath the ends of the car and let gravity actually let it run downhill like it really would. And Walt's been working on the roof of his car, and you can still see how shiny one end of it is. This car started out the same way, and I've applied I've applied 2 layers of red oxide shade to it and completely faded it out. And from this point now, I could add more rust to it if I wanted to, or just add grime and dust to it. And but I've already toned down the entire roof of the car, which is what Walt is headed to on the roof of his Alabama State Docks car.
Hey, we're at a good point. Anybody got any questions right now?
Yep.
We've been doing the talking, but this is all about training camp, so this is a great time to interact with everybody and
Yep. So
get a feel for what everybody's doing and if
yep.
they're working
Yep. We need to see
engaged and all
what
that
we
good
need to
stuff.
see what you're up to now, and if you've got questions.
Can we hear?
Hello.
I see Joe talking.
Joe,
Don't
are you
everybody speak at
there?
once.
You are.
All right. In N scale, brushes work better than other things for putting Pan Pastel on cars
Yeah, that makes
because
sense.
the detail is so small. And
That's the best way to get into the crevices, Joe.
I also use these little bitty brushes for details.
Yep.
A third issue with N scale cars is the era I model, there are a lot of these silver roofs.
Yeah.
They look very, very fakey.
Yep.
So the first thing I do is I put on a coat of this raw umber tint.
Yep.
Raw umber tint will tone it down a lot.
Yep.
Then I spray the roof first, only the roof with Tamiya TS80. Put on the raw umber tint, then spray the whole car, and do the rest of the stuff. Because even if you have to take something off the roof that you put on later, you've still got this raw umber tint. And I have found that these cosmetic sponges, which I cut down to N scale,
Yep.
that's very good for taking. If you only have to take a little bit off, that'll do it. Just repeatedly rub with a fresh sponge.
So when you say you
You got
cut
to
it
take
down
a
to N
lot off. I
scale,
agree.
explain what you mean when you say cut it down to N scale. How big is your sponge for N scale, Joe?
This is the sponge that you buy at your wife's cosmetic store, and I've cut it into 8 pieces
Yep.
Okay.
for N scale.
Yep.
Good.
Yep.
Cut it into 8 pieces.
And that's the nice thing about these sponges that you get at the cosmetic store or Publix or Kroger or wherever it is you go. They're cheap. And if you do cut it down, you pull out a pair of scissors and cut it down. And you don't like that one, you blown 3 cents.
And if it gets really dirty, you just cut off the dirty part and keep going.
Yeah. Have you been able to use the little knife
Palette.
pallets to go with it? Have you been able to use these to do larger flat areas on things like your big box car?
I've used it a little bit, but I'd have to tell you, an N scale brushes work better.
That works.
That's a
one of the
critical
things
piece
I
of
do
advice.
is I do dry brush Pan Pastel. I dump the brush in the Pan Pastel, and then I tap it on a piece of plastic to
Yep.
get most of the Pan Pastel off.
Yep.
And then I go, if I need just a little more, I go where I tapped it off and pick up some more.
Yep.
Because it's very easy to get too much in N scale.
Oh yeah, it is. I just did your technique of the raw umber tint on the roof of this boxcar. Whoops. And I like the effect. It's not quite the same as the rusty one that I start with, but I kind of like the effect for toning it down.
That's a good starting point. Then you
Yeah.
have to do whatever you would do.
Yep.
All right. So while you all been talking, I've been just sitting here applying a little bit, leaving the streaks on the ribs from that little paint streak I did, but just hitting it real quickly with the sponge. I did the rooftop real quick. Right now, I've only used one color. I feel like I need to put something else in there, like a white, just to tone it down, just to kind of get something in there to lighten the color, to highlight it a little. And obviously, I haven't even used black, but it's starting to get that dark tint to it as I started to do this. So it's good to see this because it's till you do it, you really don't know how it's going to turn out. And if you remember right, I put some dark splotches in there. They already dried and looking good, so it looks like a little bit of a flakiness in there from the rust pattern. And then on the boxcar door, this is a little different. I am going to run it with the grain of the door horizontally. I'm not pulling it down. I'm actually running it because the panels are horizontal on this boxcar. Now, one thing I did forget, there's a little groove between the roof and the up here. I got to get in there and get a little bit of the material. But that quick, you can transition. So if you have a large fleet of cars that you got to go back on, I've been building my fleet up for years. So when I retire, I have plenty to do. Well, I have plenty to do, and I don't know when I'm going to retire, but it's going to be a while. But I got plenty to do on cars. Even if I don't buy another car today, I've probably got a couple of years worth of weathering. So, but that quick, and I don't know if you can see it on the camera as well as I'd like you to, but that quick you get the detail without losing the detail of the car. This is actually a fairly nice little car with good stirrups on it, all that. So I don't want to lose any of that nice detail. And then I'll come back on the ends, kind of bugger that up a little bit to get a little darkness in there.
What were you showing from Tamiya?
All right, these are, Tamiya makes these little bitty Q-tip like things. It is a Tamiya craft cotton swab.
Ah,
They don't give them away. It's $5 for 50. But this is very good for reaching into those tiny little places.
yep. Hey,
Yeah.
who's next that we should look at? Who wants to pop something up next?
Hank, what you working on?
Since you're next in the row.
Here we go.
There we go.
I'm working on maintenance of way gondola here.
Okay, good.
So this is going to be one of those ones that is more highly weathered because this is one of the ones that is worn out, so it became maintenance away.
All right.
Yep.
So what I was just doing on mine is pretty much the same thing you're kind of doing, getting a lot of banging up and rusty and,
Yeah,
it's
I think I
amazing
started
those
a little bit
cars.
too late, but I think I'm going to start over with. Who do I got here? Burnt Sienna. Right out.
Okay. And now we're back to Joe Sullivan because you're making noise. So who's next?
I'll go.
Okay.
I just had a junk Rock Island 4-bay hopper. I was working on just started with some rust streaks on the side, and then kind of went over it again with like a neutral gray, and then blacked out the inside of the hopper. So
Yeah, the inside of your hopper looks horrible, so that's good.
yeah. Sides look a little bit banged up too, so it's.
Yeah, rock cars, especially as they age, really got disgusting looking. I was thinking about this the other day because Rock Island just didn't do much maintenance on especially once they reached that the rock image, that paint scheme, from that point forward, they didn't get much maintenance and they really looked trashed out.
So I'm doing good then.
You've headed in the right direction with your Rock Island car. You could almost make it to the point where there was no paint left on it at all, and you'd probably be fine.
Okay. Well, good starting point.
Yeah.
Well, keep this in mind in today's railroading that, especially Hank, you were doing that maintenance away car, as banged up and ugly as you may get it, the one thing they need is that number visible.
Yeah, the reporting marks,
Oh, yeah.
they'll get repainted.
Even if they box it out and repaint it or renumber it, even if they hand draw it on there, sometimes they do in maintenance away cars. They may just use a can of spray paint and do it. But just so you know, as bad as the car looks, a lot of times it's all about they got to get that number visible.
The reporting marks have to be visible, and the safety striping has to be visible if you're modeling today. Back in the era where the Rock Island, there wasn't, you wouldn't have seen a ton of graffiti.
But no
But-
safety stripes either.
And no safety stripes, but the reporting marks still had to be visible. Next.
Perry, this is John. I had a question. Could you just put a piece of masking tape or something over the car number and then do your Pan Pastels and then peel that tape off and make it look like it would be repainted?
You most certainly could, without a doubt. And the other thing I've thought about doing now, and I haven't quite gotten to the point yet where I want to try it, is I have some cars that are probably reached an age like that hopper car I started with, where things would be repainted afterwards, like what you're pointing out. And I've thought about then applying a couple of drops of future floor wax, which is really highly glossy and fills in a lot of really small stuff. So it would fill in all of the Pan Pastels and whatever weathering I'd put over an area of a car like the reporting marks. And then and it's a nice glossy finish, so you could apply a patch out decal over it and then new numbers over that if you wanted to. But your idea, I would almost be inclined to use a piece of blue painter's tape to do what you propose.
Yes.
Put it down on a sheet of glass, cut it out with an X-Acto blade or whatever blade you were using, and apply that with a pair of tweezers over the reporting marks. Do all of your weathering and then peel off the reporting marks. I tried that not too long ago. I actually tried that not too long ago with an auto rack. I applied blue painter's tape over one of the outside panels, and then I applied flat finish and all the weathering. Then I peeled off the section of blue painter's tape and left one very glossy, nice bright aluminum um, replacement panel on an auto rack, and I applied just a little bit of dust over it, and that was it. And the effect was interesting because you could see how shiny that one piece was in comparison to everything else. You could do that with roof panels. You could do that with doors on boxcars.
So it totally changes the look of that box car that I just did. What I did, it just totally gives it a different look. I'll turn around the other side here in just a second, just to get a. So that's the weather side. That's how it started, and that's how just a little bit of weathering on it can change the look of the car.
Next.
Who's I can't see all the names up there.
Well, let's see. We've heard from Hank. Joe is up on the screen right now. We've seen
Other Joe's here.
We've seen the other Joe. Wendy, what are you up to?
Got a box car that I just tried it. Well, sorry.
There we go.
Oh yeah, cool.
There we go.
Yeah.
So it was gray, so I kind of just dulled it down a little bit.
Yep.
And then on the roof, I toned that down, and I did a little bit of rust down the sides, down on the seams.
Yep.
And I'm just working at it, and then I got to do something with the ends.
Yep. And eventually you'll need to do something not quite contrasting, but something to set the roof walk apart from the rest of the roof.
Okay, I was gonna try that panel line accent color.
That might work really well.
Okay.
That might work really well. I don't have a roof walk to try it on. Because,
I'll
well,
let you know.
actually I do. You know, that's interesting. Because this ethanol car has roof walks. And if I pull out
Try it. See.
dark gray or light gray, I think dark gray.
Yeah, that's what's so fascinating about working on freight cars, because everything has a different effect depending on what industry it comes from. You know, what the weather environment is. Is it a car that stays up north a lot with snow, or is it a car that's down south? You know, so weathering has different impacts on different cars. So
I kind of like this.
yeah, he's trying that little accent on the. Hang on a second. Can't see if I'm getting you or not.
I'll put the car up there once I'm done.
Yeah,
I
can't see the image of it.
Yeah, because I have it set to focus on whoever it is who's speaking, but that doesn't apply to us, which is fine. So I have taken dark gray panel line wash, and I've done that to the roof walks on this Procore ethanol tank car, and I like the effect. It'll be interesting to see what happens when it dries and if I want to add another layer to it. But that's the joy of weathering. And I think I would be inclined to do exactly the same thing, and I'm about to, on the etched walkways at the ends of the car. Because it will gray and dirty and fade out that bright aluminum paint that's on. Well, it's no paint, it's metal, but it really, and I don't know how well you can see it on in the image, but the effect in real life is or here in front of me is really nice with this dark gray. I'm glad I didn't use black. And I think light gray would have been too light, but I like the effect that I got with the dark gray panel line on the walkways on the etched metal walkways on that car. That was a good thought.
Barry,
And-
can I offer an alternative to the panel line? Now,
Sure.
this is a very tricky thing to do. I saw a picture in a book of an old Pacific Fruit Express car that got very dirty, and then it got run through one of these automatic washers, and it left a lot of dirt here and there.
No kidding.
So I gave a very heavy coating of Pan Pastels. Then I took these advanced eye makeup remover pads, and I took most of the Pan Pastel off,
Okay.
and it left Pan Pastels in the crevices.
Yep. Which it should do.
This is one of these, don't try this at home with a very expensive car. Do it on something cheap first.
Yeah. Practice on something cheap. I'd have to go dig through blue box cars to find something cheap. So I'm practicing on my current fleet of ready to run cars and Intermountain cars, and I'm okay.
Bob Brannon's discount counter. He always has a display of cars on sale. That's a good place to get cheap cars.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Alan, what are you up to?
So mute.
Well, I'm working on an Atlas reefer, Atlantic AMP reefer, and a Southern boxcar. At the same time, trying to get two things done. I don't have a lot to offer to this group. I'm sorry. I came on here to learn how to use Pan Pastels. My experience is more with regular pastel weathering powders and airbrush and washes. So I'm trying to figure out how to use the pastels. I've tried them in the past and wasn't happy. And I understand what you said earlier. They're hard to wash off, but once you get them on there, they stay.
Yep.
Hey, Alan, you know, and I'm in the same way you are. I used the chalk pastels years ago, and they tend to just kind of fade off, or they rub off early, or fall off the car. And then if you hit it with like a dull coat, it just washes it away real quick. So the old pastel days were really hard to use, and Pan Pastels really stick to the car. So that's the benefit of the Pan Pastels. I've been big on airbrushing as well. And there's sometimes the effect of the airbrush just gets that what you want. But, I would say it's about 70-80% Pan Pastels can do a lot of what you're wanting to get effectiveness wise, color wise for
Yeah,
weather.
and which is why I was wanting to learn how to better use them.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Although I did find a little um, a method to help with washing away all that regular pastel chalk. If you don't hit it too hard with the dull coat or whatever, if you back it off maybe a foot and a half and just let the lightest mist that you can come up with hit it,
Yeah.
it'll help hold it on without uh, making it disappear.
Yep.
Yeah. It just has an effect. As soon as it gets wet, it tends to change. But yeah, that's one of the frustrating things where regular chalks were recommended for years, and they just didn't have the same effect that we were all, they would look good when you did it at first, but as soon as you touched the car, it's like,
It was
wow, it
gone.
changed. Yeah. So,
Yeah. Well, that was why you hit it with the mist lightly. You
yeah.
don't hit the car with it. You just get a little film, so to
Mhm.
speak. I don't know. It takes a little use, and you do waste a lot of
Spray.
your dull coat product.
Yeah.
Go because you
So
have
you
to have it
just,
backed away so far that you wind up spraying it everywhere.
so you just got into the Pan Pastels?
Well, yeah, I've had some of them for quite a while, probably about 2 years. I tried them
Okay.
when I brought them home and thought, oh, this isn't working for me. They're completely different from what I'm used to. So I kind of put them aside.
Yeah. Yeah. The sponge is really the trick to using these things. It's, how much pressure you apply, and then I mix colors. It's all about mixing the colors and coming back, and even though you might get something on it, come back with highlight it with another color and then cover it with something else. So, this box car I'm working on right now, I'm working between about 2 or 3 colors maybe. So,
Yeah.
I'm using the light rust and a little bit of the white, and then I'm using a semi dark gray. So,
Yeah. And that's another issue I have with this, with what we're doing here. I don't have the same palette you guys have.
okay,
So I have no grays at all, and I have no
okay,
black.
I got you.
So I'm kind of not
Yeah, I
able to
think
quite
Alan, when we got ours, I think was this a basic railroad packet or something they had? It was
Somewhere in my collection of stuff, I have, I think, one or maybe two actual sets. The rest of what we have were factory seconds from Pan Pastels.
but mine what? Mine I bought it, but I thought it was actually railroad colors, what
Yeah,
they called it.
well, hold on a second. Let me.
Yeah, there was something about it, Alan. There was an actual and you can find them individually, but I think I remember when I bought mine, it was an actual. I think they recommended for railroad colors or something. It was.
Okay, there is a weathering. There are two different weathering sets, they call them. One is rust and earth, and the other is grays, grimes, and soot. And then they have a scenery set.
Okay. I
And
have the rust and earth.
okay, yeah, because you have no grays. So what you need now are a couple of the ones out of the gray section, neutral gray or Payne's gray or Payne's gray extra dark to add that to your black so that you'll have highlights and you can blend the black with grays to fade and add grind to roofs without turning everything black, which might be fine for a car that is quite old in the steam era that ran behind some really dirty steam locomotives that weren't well maintained. Or maybe some cars that spent a lot of time on the Southern Pacific in snow sheds.
Okay.
Mhm.
There,
Also, let me add, I just want to add one thing in there.
yeah.
Blick in Roswell right now has many of the Pan Pastels on sale.
Who does?
Look,
And
Blick,
they
yes.
have the full range of all the pastels.
yeah, I
Yeah.
love going to that place. They have good art brushes and you can
Yeah.
get cutting pads, Exactos, whatever you need. They've got just about everything there.
Yeah, they got
Just
the
hang
Pan
on to your
Pastels
wallet.
right there at the door.
Who is this?
Dick Blick and Roswell.
It's an art
Oh, okay.
supply,
Oh.
but you can get drafting materials, grid paper, scale rules, stuff like that. They've got everything. You can get markers.
Then they have a website.
Yeah, that would have to do for me. I'm in Virginia.
Okay, yeah, they're a national company, so
Oh,
Yeah, I didn't think of them to look at, but I know who they are.
and they usually offer you a pretty nice discount. Like when you first sign up online, they'll usually give you a code, and you'll get an initial discount right in your initial order. So, but they're fantastic. So yeah, they're a good resource, and they tend to stock stuff very well. So
there you go.
yeah, that's good suggestion, Hank, because they
Yes.
are good.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
Dick
'cause I
Blick is
just picked up some more.
Dick Blick is a good place to go get Pan Pastel materials because they have them. They don't have them in the sets, but they have them.
I bought mine at a train show at Timonium, Maryland, so and they
Okay,
don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
are they going
Although
to
maybe they're
reinstate it? Are they going to reinstate it?
Timonium?
Yes, sir.
I don't know. I know there is something here in my area in Fredericksburg coming in August. It's a Greenberg show. If you guys are familiar with one of those.
Yes.
Yeah, we are.
No, but for Timonium, they're coming back.
They
They
are
are
good.
correct. Okay,
Yep, Gear said not too long ago they will be back.
great. Great to
The
hear.
one they had in the hotel wasn't as great as they thought, but they'll be back at the fairgrounds.
Good
I
deal.
wasn't aware they had anything else. They did something online, didn't they? Is that what you're talking about?
No, they had one and they put it at the hotel. They didn't have it at the fairground. And
Okay.
they didn't get the turnout that they had hoped for.
Interesting. I didn't know they had one in a hotel.
I didn't either.
No, this was just one that they did because they couldn't get it in the fairgrounds. So they put it in the
Okay.
hotel just trying to do one. And then they decided, no, we'll just wait until the things are more back to normal.
Yeah, it is. It's hard. It's definitely difficult. So, who else do we have? I can't see the names up there.
Well, we've been through the bulk of we've been through everybody once, so we can go see now and see how people are doing in terms of progress.
Yeah.
Oh, Guess
Or
you're back to me again.
we're back to you again.
Oh, can, can you see it?
Yes.
Yes.
It's coming along.
Okay.
It is.
You know, and for some of y'all, just so y'all know, we've always put these on in person, so this is our first time doing this like online. But you know, when we did training class before, that's what we would usually just sit next to people and work with them and help them. So and kind of go through stuff.
This is what I did with the British Region.
Yeah. So it
I,
works good.
I did online with the British Region, and people popped up and showed me what they were working with, and we went through things.
Yeah.
Joe Sullivan has been working away with his in-scale cars, which has been interesting. It's nice because people bring what they have to things like this, and it's cool because I don't work. I used to work in in-scale, but I don't work in in-scale now. So when I see people bring stuff in in-scale, it's fun to sit and look at what they have and come up with better ideas for how to do stuff in in-scale.
Like Gary coming online. Looks like Gary Fish online.
Gary Fish, are you around there somewhere?
The last right side. That's him.
Yeah, that is Gary. Gary.
Can I mute me on this one?
There you are. We now see
Ah,
Gary.
Hey, Dr. Fish.
hey, how are you?
Fine, sir. How are you?
Real good, real good. I
Good.
just
Good.
pulled out a couple of cars waiting for them. I'm gonna start working on a little bit of this one. I've had had some other people butcher the other side, and now I want to see if we can make this one look right. So that's what we're working on with bit of my Pan Pastels. So
Okay.
Yeah. That looks like one of the sets.
it is. We have. I picked up one from Steve with the grays in it. You were talking about the grays, and I got one over at Hobbytown. They had with the colors. So I figure I'm in good shape for pretty much trying anything at this point.
Yeah, and the nice thing is that they will last you forever. I've been using this one kind of messed up palette on that I have for, I don't know, 6 years, and I barely made a dent in it. What happened to the other side of your boxcar that somebody?
We have during our Wednesday group, one of the guys was showing off some of the techniques he did, and well, it really wasn't coming along very well. Kept asking him to finish his work, but it's really did look just like a bit of mush, and I wanted to see if I can actually make it look acceptable.
Yeah, it should be possible to fix that.
Yeah.
What did they start with?
He was using the powdered pastels.
Okay.
Mixing up in little mixer cups, and at one point they were like you couldn't see what was even in the cards; they were totally covered. And I'm going, you got to get to a point where you've got to show some of the card stuff back. Some of the plain ones I could see doing that, but ones that have pictures on it, you don't want to lose everything behind the.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm after on my multicolored Intermountain car that I've applied graffiti to. I want to tone it down, but I don't want to obliterate the graffiti because graffiti isn't cheap, and I haven't decided to sit down with paint markers and paint my own graffiti yet, although that's coming. And let's
Go back to Joe Cognini.
Yeah.
See what he's working on.
I had a Chicago Northwestern cattle car. I was weathering for more of the steam era. So the roof is a lot of it's neutral gray, Payne's gray, and black.
Yep.
And then on the sides, I was throwing on kind of like a neutral gray and brown, trying to get sort of like a mud and ballast look.
Yep.
Side. Not sure how well you can see it, but
Hold it back just a little bit,
okay.
because the glare from the light is kind of obliterating the car, but
Yeah,
the
that's
so it's
better.
there we go. I like that. You might want to get just a bare amount of titanium white and have it run down. That's even a better picture. Have it run down the sides of the car underneath the lettering. Just
Sides of the
a
car
hair
underneath the
underneath
lettering.
the lettering.
Okay.
Really lightly.
Yeah, I've got both the rust and earth and the what was it? The Gray's Grime and Soot pastel kits, and that's really making a big difference.
Yep. And if you don't have titanium white, the lightest gray you have, just a bare amount of it down under, it's vertically down, fading out underneath the white lettering, because I kind of think a car like that would have faded lettering because of the contents of the car.
Right. Really got to thin it out here.
Yeah, and your idea of using a knife to do that, to me, makes sense too. What? What did you do?
I put some I have a covered hopper that carries pulverized marble. So I put a bunch of titanium white on the top, and I put some alcohol on a brush, and I brushed it down, and I like it.
Yeah, that's sort of the effect that Peter Youngblood ended up on his gas station, where where it's streaking down the sides because of rain and rain mostly.
I've been
It's
trying to figure out how to do this for a long time, so thanks to you and Peter.
Yep, impressive. That's what we're after. Have a look at this card, because it's probably time to, yeah. I put wash on the ends of the card to fill in the corners of the ends, because those really heavily textured ends, it's hard to get a pan pastel anything into them. So I washed the end of the car, and that's helped. And it's gotten gunk down into, I can't find me. Oh well, it's gotten gunk
Okay.
down into the end of the car. But now I can go over the tops of the ends with pan pastels, and that'll help blend that part together. Because in the dead center, I don't have anything yet, but I think now if I run, yep, that's what I needed. I did the brake gear, and I did around the ladders with wash, and now the rest of the end of the car I've added pan pastels to, and I blended the entire end of the car. I like that. Really like that. The one thing that's nice about the washes is you can get inside the ends of covered hoppers underneath the slope sheets with a wash, and a really ugly wash, and it looks good. This is Perry.
Let me show y'all. Hopefully I can see y'all. Can y'all see me?
Okay, I will go pick it up.
See your
Yeah.
hand.
Can
See
y'all
your
see my
arm.
tank car?
Bye.
Yes.
Perry, I can't see the image. If we can pop it up, make sure they can see it.
I wish
So one of the things I'm working on, it's a Kaolin tank car. It's from Atlas, and it's a little bit different working on one of these. I don't want to make it too dirty. The environment it in is a very dry white dust. If it gets mud and other colors on it, it's usually from running on the open road and not the environment of the plants that usually on it. You might see some tendency to get a little bit of rust. So one of the techniques I'm going to use is I take the little sponge applicator and I wipe it on the paper towel, and then I'm going to run it through a little bit of the light rust, and then I'm going to rub it on the paper towel, and then I'm going to rub it on some of the white, and then I'm going to come back and hit it. And this is the clean side, and I'm going to start at the top and kind of come down and start dulling, but it's got a little bit of tint of the rust in it, not just pure white. And then I'm coating the tank car up there to get that little bit of that color. I just didn't
Hey,
want
Barry.
pure white. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Who's that?
I don't know. He didn't speak very long.
Was it John Neely?
John or Joe?
Not me.
No, the other
It
Joe.
wasn't.
No, somebody. Hank
Oh,
popped up for a
sound like-
second.
Sound like John Neely.
Yeah,
John, you
might have
there?
been John.
Yeah, I had just a quick comment, Walt, about yours. One of the things I like about the Pan Pastel, as opposed to acrylics and other media, is that you get a lot of subtlety. Like that rust, you can just barely see that rust that you're working on, and that's harder for me to do with acrylics and others.
Yes. No, you're exactly right, because it tries to just, it's too strong. And the Pan Pastels, I mean, you can just barely see it. And again, I'm taking it, wiping it on the paper towel, and then applying it. So you're right. It's just a light into the tank car, and I'm getting the effect I want. And that's really what I'm looking for. I don't want an overly weathered car, but and just so y'all know, I did hit this with the dull coat earlier, just to get it. The other thing I did also on this car, on the ends, I did take a little bit of the rust and I ran it on just the thin edge of the foam, and ran it where the wheels sling the mud up from the tracks. I ran it up on the ends, and then I did hit the white on the walkway plates and on the undercarriage wires and all that kind of stuff to give it that effect. You are right. The colors I'm looking for, about the only way to get it is to use something like this, because I can't get it otherwise to do a wash. It would be really, really hard to get it to do with what we're trying to accomplish here. So, but that's a Kaolin car used with very light weather, and this is the way most of them look. Especially back in the late 80s or 90s, this is probably when this car would have been around. It wouldn't have been weathered too much other than through that. Now, the only thing I probably will do is I'm going to take a little bit of brown and light it and hit some white, and I'm going to hit the trucks with it. When these cars are in the plants, they tend to get a lot of cake up from the splatter in the plants. And they do spend a lot of time in the plants with the loading and all that. So a rusted truck may not look the same on this car as it would some of the other cars, just because of the Kaolin environment where they load out these actual tank cars. So I'm just hitting this, but it gives me the effect that I'm looking for. And boom, I've got a nice weather tank car, and but it applies for that particular type of product that I'm seeing. So it's not overly weathered, just a light weather. So, but if you're weathering tank cars, that's the way to do it, because if you're weathering a black tank car, a lot of times if you put black on it, you're going to cover the lettering and stuff like that. So you're going to need to work with colors that kind of blend in and get it the subtle grayness or the whiteness to the car to give it that whitewash effect or something.
Which is what I did for the last one of these I did.
Yeah.
And I'm almost thinking
And that car didn't take us, what, 5 minutes to do. So that just gives you an idea of how quick I can weather a car. And I'm more than happy with that car. That's not I didn't want it to be overbearingly weathered. I just wanted something to look very basically used. So
Hey Perry,
Yes, sir.
here's the that white streaking I did on the uh, cattle car or stock cars.
Yep. Yep. I like that.
Okay,
Especially
well thank you.
especially underneath on, to me, the right hand end of that car. It looks like it ran down over the boards, individual boards, down towards, the slats on the side of the car, down towards the underframe. I like that. That looked good. That looks good.
Thank you. So,
Yeah.
Perry, this is John again. I have a question about that. On cattle cars, I've seen pictures, especially in older things like John Allen, where he had an old cattle car, and the bottom three boards, horizontal boards on the thing, looked white, and I can't remember what that was. Would they use some kind of lye as disinfectant, or what was it that they put that
That
white on there for?
That's exactly what they did. They used lye or something along those lines to clean the cars when they were done, and it trashed out the lower boards. It really did a number on the lower boards. So and you are exactly right. That's what happened.
John, I would think that's a combination of the urine, the feces, and probably their cleaning process with the acidity and all that. Just it probably did a huge number on some of those cars. So from
So
the
you,
bottom sill down.
so you think we ought to get some cow chips and add a scent or an odor to the car
The
to make
odor
it
is really
complete?
important.
Hey, John, you say that we used to have a chemist in our group, and he was working on different smells that you could spray around the train room to have that diesel effect or steam like the cinder effect. He was making fragrances that were bottled up in a bottle with railroad type fragrances for your train room. So he's moved along. I think he lives out near Tyler, Texas now. So, but yeah, he was working on all kinds of cool stuff. He brought some samples and let me smell them a couple times. He was getting it down pretty good.
That's neat.
Yeah, they made products in the industry, and he would be able to fool around with some of the stuff and make different products, and he was finding ways to make it. So it's kind of cool. Yeah, walk into your train room and get that diesel effect. Smell like you're standing there at the diesel rack.
Yeah.
I've done this side. This is the side I just did. This is the side I was trying to tone down that was done before. And what's your opinion? How it looks to you?
It
Looks pretty good, Gary.
Yeah, it looks better. It looks more blended. And what's your side? Yeah, that
This is
looks
my side.
better because it's a bit more even. The side that somebody, yeah,
Is it a wood side card, Gary? Is that what that is?
yeah, it
The
looks
car would
like
have
it's
told me which side.
yeah, it looks like it's a wood side reefer.
Yeah. So
Right.
your highlights would be strong in your grooves.
Yeah,
And
which they are. Um, there are still some vertical streaks on that side of the car, that original, that somebody tried to do, and it still look a little bit harsh to me, but
I'm gonna keep working on it. That's good.
you blended them in. The side that you're working on from scratch, I like. It's not harsh.
You see cars that are excessively weathered, but not usually. I mean, it just sometimes they're really, really over the top, but most of the time, no.
Yeah. The most weathered cars I've seen were on are pictures of cars from John Allen's railroad. Good subject matter. And then I've seen some really trashed out cars on on Rock Island and um, Rio Grande and a couple of the other Midwest roads, when they were reaching the end of their useful existence before they got swallowed up by somebody. I got paged for work, but nobody.
You see it now? Is that more the effect you were talking about, getting rid of the excessive stuff?
Yes. Exactly. Yep. Yeah, that's an improvement, I think.
Acceptable now for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's far more acceptable.
Wendy, how you doing out there?
I'm just playing still.
Okay. Okay.
Playing is fun. Did you try putting a wash on the roof walk?
I put all I had was a light gray,
Yep.
so I tried that.
Yep. It toned it down a lot and made it look more like the rest of the roof.
Okay.
I'm trying the same thing with a light gray wash in around all of the roof hatches on this car on this ethanol car. Yeah, because I'm using light gray on the sides, and it to me the light gray on the sides did a nice job of toning it down, but I couldn't get a sponge of any kind inside and around the roof walk or the manways on the roof of the top of the car. So I used a wash, and I'm interested in seeing what it does when it dries. I think I'm going to also do the same thing under the handrails. Yeah, under the handrails at the ends of the car and let that just run downhill. And I think that'll help the end of the car because it's hard to get anything.
John, I have another question, Perry.
Speak.
Walt. On the old refrigerator cars where they actually would drop in blocks of ice, since you mentioned roof hatches, would those roof hatches been rusty? Would they have kept it clean since there was fruit or something perishable in the car, or would they just been filthy, or how would you weather one of those?
They did get rusty. Just natural because of salts and water and everything else and weather. There was a lot of rust around the around the portals, and there obviously was a lot of rust down the lower end where it started to fatigue the car on the sill line where water would leak and all that. So you also got rust effects, kind of a seam along the bottom and stuff where the ice melted, and also down on the trucks there was also a lot of rust on the drips. So yeah, they did have a lot on those cars. Yeah, their age limits were very limited, John. Those cars didn't last very long. They were susceptible to the fatigue from all that took its place on it. Once the refrigerated car came out, of course it replaced it, but still, even those original cars didn't last very long. Rust was their downfall right there because of the ice and water. And I don't know if they use salt in it or not. I guess some of the meat cars may have had some salt or something in them. It's very possible as a preservative. We were out in Kansas City for that trip a couple of years ago for a convention, and the magnitude of meat cars from the packing plants was just phenomenal. Um, the fleet was huge, and there were so many packing plants. They showed us where where the market yards were between Texas and Oklahoma and Kansas City. Just phenomenal what was out there back then. With all the loadouts. So it's big business.
Yeah, Can you imagine the smells if you had visited in the 30s or 40s around one of those packing plants in Kansas City?
It had to be rough down there.
Yeah.
Not a place you wanted to hang out too long.
Yeah.
So
I like this. I used the wash
yeah,
around the manways and down inside the ladders.
yeah. So that's what I just used. I used your wash and put it on the walkway on the top just to kind of
Yep.
give it a different look away from the regular white,
Yep.
which is where the dirty shoes, grime,
Yep.
and all that walking.
And I may now add a little bit of black up here.
Yeah, I need to get some of that.
I like this stuff. I've started using this sort of thing like up in here on the walkways and on the brake rigging on these open hoppers, because you can't get into those with
No.
with any kind of a sponge.
What,
But
Chad? What? Oh, you're mad at me because I won't let you steal my stuff.
exactly,
Man,
he's gonna come.
he did. He's
He's upset.
hey, bud. Should take my shoes.
He hasn't tried to steal a shoe in a while.
Yeah. You silly dog.
I might
Yes.
just mention there's one reason that I'm not following along. Seems like everybody else is weathering a car, but I got really interested after an NMRA presenter mentioned Pan Pastels about 6 months ago. And so I went out and bought the 10 car weathering set that I think, Perry, you have. But I went out in the first week, in 4 or 5 days, I weathered like 100 cars.
Wow.
And I made myself so sick from chalk dust. For 2 or 3 weeks, I couldn't breathe right. I have asthma to begin with.
Okay.
So I
Good.
haven't done it because I have this procedure coming up I need to be pretty healthy for. But I've learned, for me, with an asthma sufferer, I'm going to have to wear either a little dust mask like we wear for COVID virus, or get me what do you call it, a spray booth thing, because it really does bother my lungs.
You may find, and it's something that I highlighted in the slide set, but only for a moment. It almost sounds partially like, and now, granted, 100 cars in 5 days is a lot of
Inhale it.
that's a lot.
Overkill.
That may be open. I wasn't going to say that, but something that I did note in the slide set, and you might want to really pay attention to when you are, and I've seen this, and it's why my my workbench is kind of now permanently dark gray, or the cutting board on my workbench down in the basement is kind of now a permanent dark gray. When I first started working with Pan Pastels, and I added this to the slide set, is you really do not need much of the Pan Pastels on your sponge or on the knife and its cover when you're working. And you can tell when somebody has added a lot and had too much on their sponge, because if you look on their work surface when they're done, their work surface is covered with Pan Pastels. If you look at the work surface where I've been working today, as opposed to the paper towel where I have been working in the past, my work surface paper towel today is mostly gunky because I dropped sponges on it. But the one where I have worked in the past over here, it's got a lot of Pan Pastels on it, because at times I get a little sloppy and put too much on the sponge, and then when you're wiping it on the car, some of it falls off, and it doesn't vaporize, but it
Goes in the air.
it breaks up and into the air, and there it is. And that doesn't, and so you may end up, it may end up, or it may be that you got excess on your sponge, and it ends up just aerosolizing more or less, and you inhale it. So you're right. A dust mask might be a very good thing for you. Um, but also you might try using far less. I think Joe Sullivan was and Walt also both were talking about, tapping most of it off and dry brushing with a hand pastel sponge or a Q-tip or something. But in reality, that shouldn't be necessary because usually when you use pan pastels, you use it lightly, um, and you build up the layers very slowly.
Well, I'm glad you explained that because I did not use the technique of tapping thing off, and I did not use using a dry paper towel to get most of it off the brush. So as a result, my table and I both looked like we had been weathered
Yeah.
when I got done.
Well, can
Hey,
you?
hey, real quick too, John. I try to use when I use paper towels for doing these my projects and all. I try to use a fairly high absorbent quality paper towel too. When I rub it, it doesn't just try to tear on me, but at the same time, it holds that dust in that seems to be on a good quality paper towel.
Walt, can you focus this down on my dark gray down here? Yeah. So, John, when you reach into it, I mean, I've reached across it and I picked up probably twice what I really need. I mean, it's just I really did lightly stroke it through the dark gray here, and I still picked up maybe twice what I need. And if I do pat this on but if I pat it on my paper towel, I didn't get that much off. So I didn't pick up a ton, but
Where you do a smear.
yeah, I mean, like very, very, very light finger pressure and just a teeny tiny drag through the pan pastels is all you need. And so if I pick this up now and drag it across the roof of my car, it fades out the Procore reporting marks on the roof, but that basically that's it. And so if I'm adding to it, I just add a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time, and that's it.
Yeah.
Well, that was worth the price of admission right there because that I've learned just all the things that I was doing wrong and things that I could improve, and now I feel more comfortable at trying it.
Yeah.
And
But,
I
but
had a
you are
couple of
right, John.
things.
I mean, you might have to wear some kind of respirator or some kind of if it's definitely an irritant to your lungs.
Yeah.
You may need to wear something just to protect you in that environment,
Yeah.
so you're not susceptible to it.
Can I add something? I
Speak.
would I would advise you to do it in the shop. Don't do it in a nice room with rugs.
And you
Getting
can see
pan
that I'm doing this in my
pastel out of
office.
rugs is not something that's possible. On my desk, I take a plastic box top and turn it upside down, and I put my pan pastels on that. And when I tap out my brush, I do it on this upside down plastic box top, and that's the source of the next pan pastels I use.
Yeah.
Well, and that's
Picking it up,
we're on the same track because Perry had a piece of brown paper down, but I laid paper towel down for us to work on. So when we're done, we'll just fold up that paper towel and it'll take the dust with it as well when we're
Yeah.
done. So,
Yeah.
so it won't be
and if you
just
don't
sitting there.
do your application over one of these paper towels, do it over an empty garbage can or wash pan,
Yeah.
because occasionally you will knock a piece off the car and
Yeah.
you want to be able to find it quickly.
Good point.
Yeah, it's interesting that all these are little things that sometimes we take for granted because we work from our home table workbenches, but it's different things can happen to different people. It's the same way when using these lacquers and things like that. They may be irritants to your lungs, so you always need to be careful what you're spraying or whatever because this stuff could definitely act. If you're an asthmatic person, it could definitely aggravate your asthma and stuff. So. That's for sure.
I believe in wearing an apron. As you can see,
I can see.
I have
Yes.
wiped out many a shirt because I'm used to going and then working on something.
Well, it's funny
And
you say that because Perry said, "Hey, don't you have a training camp shirt?" And I said, "I do, but I didn't really want to get it dirty." So I said, "I just wore a T-shirt to do this because same kind of thing. I didn't want to mess up a good shirt." So, but yeah, I'm the same way with you, Hank. You know, if I just rub my fingers one time, my fingers right now look like I've run it through the pencil machine. You know, so.
yeah,
Hank, I just thought you were OCD. I didn't realize.
oh, I have that too, you know, but hey,
I've got to get me an apron like that. That's good.
I have an apron that I use when I'm doing this stuff from time to time.
Alan,
Perry,
how
based
you
on
doing
your
there?
advice, I did
I've
another
noticed-
car. This is an original side. Like we were talking about. So here's the where it's just got a minimal amount of weathering, and it looks a lot better doing the minimal. I like that.
Yep. Yep.
yeah,
Well, you
I
know,
was gonna
light
say,
light has a strong effect of what you're doing too. You know, what you think may be minimal working at the workbench, and then you put it out on the railroad with maybe better lighting. All of a sudden, you find out you did more weathering than you thought. So, you know, it's easier to start with lighter weathering than heavy doses right out of the chute. So, Alan, you still with us?
I'm here.
How's it going up there?
Well, couple of things I've been listening to you guys saying about the overuse and putting too much on the uh, sponge. I found that out real quick
Mm-hmm.
that it doesn't take much at all. Just
Nope.
barely touch it.
Yep.
Oh, I don't know how well you can see here.
Looks
Another
good.
wood. That looks good. A nice. Since it's a food car, it wouldn't be filthy. But that look, I like that.
Yeah, your trucks look real good too.
Yeah, the trucks look good. The door hinges look good.
And the ladder area is real grungy.
Yep,
So
the ladder area is grungy. The paint is faded, but it's not obliterated because advertising for the A&P Food Company.
but you can definitely see the remnants where you got some soot
Yep.
over from the steam locomotives, and which is good.
Yep. I like it.
Yeah, I see it is a little too dirty. Yeah, I didn't want it to be quite like that. Any clues on getting it removed without completely?
Two choices, or three. One, you could attempt to use a scrubby paper towel and drag it off. Two, you could take the couplers and trucks off and wash it in soapy water carefully.
Mhm.
Three, there is the blending powders, and you could try to blend more of your weathering together, but it's not going to remove it.
Okay.
Scrub it off, wash it off, or blend it together.
Okay. Yeah, and start over. The paper towel, dry or wet?
Dry.
Try dry first. I'd try dry first.
And I just kind of use paper towel too underneath everything, kind of as my workbench. Then I just rub my sponge on that sometimes.
Hey, Perry.
Is a
Yes.
what
Perry
solvent
Walsh,
would remove
I
this?
gotta leave the meeting, but thank you again very much. I've learned a lot. So,
Not a problem. Glad you could join us.
thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Have a nice
Take
day.
care, buddy. Have a good
Thanks.
weekend.
See ya.
See you later. Bye.
In a makeup.
So,
paint. Not acetone, but
No, I would use what I have used before is soapy water,
soapy water.
warm soapy water.
Warm soapy water, yeah.
Alcohol? Oh,
Well,
This water, you could also use a regular terry cloth rag. That's what I use because I make a lot of mistakes. And generally, I've done the car twice before he comes out.
Okay.
I have not
I'm
thought
glad
of
you
it.
Too much
mentioned the
water
paper
on.
towel. That did a great job of pulling off the excess.
Are y'all
Yeah.
are y'all wetting that? Are you wetting your cloth, Hank, or what?
I
Gary
slightly
Fish,
dampen it.
Gary Fish just used a paper towel on his billboard reefer and removed most of it, and that side of the car looks good. Looks
Yeah,
good. I think
much,
it's
much better.
yeah. I
I mean,
think
this is the
it's
other side, and they now both look good. It's good.
yeah. I think that's John. I think that's more what you're after is what Gary just did on his billboard reefer, and he rubbed most of it off with a just a plain paper towel, and I like that.
I do too.
You mentioned that. I'm glad you mentioned it. That was great.
How do you guys handle, like, if you have a KD or a metal coupler? How do you weather that with chalks or acrylics or what?
I do. I just get out something like red iron oxide or something, and I'll put a little bit of that on a
Put it on a little pallet thing.
on a sponge, and just brush it over the car.
Hang on.
Oh, yeah. Walt's trying to get it to focus.
Sorry about that.
I just brushed the couplers with just a little bit of the Pan Pastels and turn them kind of a rusty color and leave them. That's all and that's it. Because much more than that might interfere with the functionality of the coupler. So just a little bit of a rusty color is all it takes.
Good.
And I'll do that with while I'm sitting here. I might as well do it since I've got the rust color on my cars.
And Gary, a while ago, you pulled out a diesel. Is there anything different in doing just a regular car and a diesel? Do you have like tank spills or oil spills or what? Or exhaust stains?
I was getting ready to get into that. I've got one right here.
Yeah. Walt has one. I do weather my diesels with Pan Pastels. My railroad spends good money on keeping its diesel fleet looking reasonable. So I will put, some brown or something, maybe a bit of gray on the pilots and on the truck side frames and on the fuel tanks, on the lower running gear. And then I'll use black and some grays on the for soot around the exhaust. The one thing I will do, and I've discovered this since I started using them, is I will use the black panel liner in the radiator fan grills and the dynamic brake grid grills and the radiator grills. And that's far nicer than what I was using before. Really adds depth to those grills, and it looks good. And mostly that's all I do because my diesel fleet is well maintained. So some soot along the roof and a little bit of grime along the lower running gear, and that's it. And Walt's got a
Yeah, let me get that.
Burlington Northern.
Yeah, Burlington Northern SD40-2.
Yeah.
So this would have been a 1970s locomotive. So tell you what, I'm gonna jump into this one, kind of go through some steps that I would be looking at that would probably be helpful to weathering. Um, I'm not going to say this is going to be a brand new locomotive. We're going to make this, let's say, about a 10-year-old locomotive or something like that into the fleet. So obviously there are tons of pictures of Brothers North if you want to, but so kind of like we did on the car, I'm going to usually start at the lower part first just to get something going. So I'm going to take my applicator and we'll get a little bit of the rust on it. Just kind of get down there where the journals are, kind of get in that area first. And I have hit this with a little bit of hey puppy, and I do have a little bit of dull coat on here. Keep in mind that these trucks are usually they're going to be rusty, but then they're going to be dirty and grimy as well. So I'm going to get them, and then I'm going to hit them with some black and maybe a light gray. I'll come back and tone it down, tone that rust down, so it gives it more of a grimy look. So even though they're black trucks, it has a totally different effect when you mix the black on top of the rust. Typically, you always have a little bit of rust in there.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll get that in there pretty good. In fact, you could just about take a new locomotive, dull it down with that on the trucks, and it changes the whole look of the locomotive. It will these colors will accent the trucks.
Yep.
Where it kind of brings out the detail of the trucks better than if you just had brand new looking trucks out there on the line.
The way I relate to trucks or running gear in general, the lower running gear in general, is if it's just the plain black truck, or or even silver on a war bonnet locomotive or something, maybe not so much there, but plain black trucks make your car look like it's actually floating on air, because prototype trucks are not black. They're rusty, they're grimy, they're dirty, but they have different highlights, they have different colors. And if all you're doing, and if your car trucks are just black, they blend into the shadows under the car, and it makes it look like your car's floating. So if you paint your wheel sets, or at least you have dark color wheel sets, but you highlight your truck with a wash and then Pan Pastels, you'll bring out the surface detail of your truck, which is nice. It makes it look like it's more detailed than it might really be. But it also makes it look like your truck, your piece of rolling stock is no longer floating, because that really looks strange.
So all I've done here, and I don't know if you can see it. Let me try something quick for you. Just a second here. This might help you. Okay, so just kind of spotting it. You'll see the color just getting rid of the normal factory black look.
Yep.
Just totally changes the look of that truck. So the next thing I like to work on now. Typically, you could take the handrails off and stuff like that. This is a scale trains locomotive, so do a lot of different things. But one of the places that really requires some weathering, I'm going to flip this over here. One, if you're not familiar with locomotives or certain key elements, in these type of locomotives, the battery boxes were down under here. But also that means a big deal, because what that meant is that the batteries would leak right there. The acid and things like that. So a lot of times what you do is you get a little bit of rust and you get some streaking coming off this thing. I'm going to put a little bit of gray right here. Just trying to get something happening. I may have to go a little bit of white just to get something to see. This is where sometimes the liquidy stuff may end up being more effective. We may have to put something in there to get the look I'm looking for. But typically you'll see the stuff oozing out of the door panels right down there where the battery
Yeah,
boxes
panel
are.
line wash then would probably work really well.
Yeah, let me try that real quick. Let's see what we got.
Black is right there. There's
Yeah, light one.
Yep, light gray.
Let's try this light
And
gray.
that may work really well because the light gray would be more like the acid has leaked out and
That's the effect I'm looking for. So I'm just trying to run it along that grid line. And typically, you can also probably use this. This is your filler cap. Let it run a little bit down where it typically runs out of the. It's going to give it a slick look, and then if I dry out the fuel tank, it'll look totally different. Now I may come back, hit this with just a little bit of
fuel tank. You might want to try this.
all right. Give it a
With
little
the
light touches
with
on
the light with the micro brush.
All right, let's try.
Because that's a fuel stain mix.
See how that looks on this.
It'll come off eventually.
All right, let's just try a little bit of gunk.
Yeah, just a little bit of that.
I'm just trying to run in the streakiness right around the fuel tank where they make a mess. And let me tell you something, people don't realize it, but they really do. When they spill fuel, it's usually they just leave the filler cap on there. They leave the little lever on and it doesn't click off, and so fuel just tends to spill very quickly off the then I'm using a little bit of ruffled edge of the paper towel, just kind of streaking it there. So a little bit of just got a bunch of paint on my finger. Just a little different appeal. I'll come back and put a little bit of this right here. There we go. Just trying to get that look. So I'm not overdoing it. I'm just trying to get a little bit of the feel of the locomotive is well used, but it's not wore out. Obviously, just trying to give it a different look. But the battery boxes are only on one side. They're not on both sides usually. So you won't see the same effect on that. A lot of times they used to keep the flares. They kept tools, torpedoes. All that was stored in these boxes, so if the brakeman had to get off the train, all that was stored right there. So they had access to it. But at the same point, stuff may leak, so we'll just try to run a little bit of rust down the sidelines right there, just to kind of give it effect. That little vent cab there. So when you know what stuff is on a locomotive, it helps so you understand what's trying to happen. Now, what Perry was saying earlier, we already have black grills, so we want to accent that a little bit. So I'm going to try something here.
Yeah, those grills are already black, so.
They're black, but I'm going to use a little bit of a light gray black just to get an effect in there. Just trying to accent it a little bit. If I use a pure gray, it's going to look really too light. I don't want that to happen.
So Walt, are you trying to get the gray only on the grill and not inside the interstices?
Yeah, I was just working in the grill area right there, Joe.
Okay.
I got my hands in the way a little bit.
You might want to use a sponge for that.
Yeah, let me try something real quick, see what happens here.
Harry, you mentioned earlier when you were doing the radiator grills, you mentioned a certain product or brand. I didn't cut out on my PC and I couldn't. Could you repeat what you use on radiator grills, please?
Yes, on radiator grills, dynamic brake grids, and the fans themselves, dynamic brake fans.
This is radiator dynamics, and then this is going to be your actual fan to your.
I use. Let me move it down and move it in a little bit. It's the Tamiya panel line wash, and this is black. panel line accent color black, and that's what I use on my locomotives on all of those grids, all of those grills, because it seeps down. The outsides are painted whatever color the locomotive is painted, but the panel line accent color is so thin, it blends, it just soaks down into the grids themselves and turns them ink black, but flat, not glossy. To my eye, it's perfect.
Hey Joe, what I did is I did put a little bit of that, not the dark black, but I have a black gray. I kind of ran that on the grills and then came back and did a little gray and then re-ran the black on top of the gray to give it a little bit of an accent. It actually turned out pretty decent.
You mean the black panel line accent?
Yeah, I ran it to see
No,
what it was. No,
just Pan Pastels.
pastels, just pan
Because
pastels.
Oh,
his
okay.
grills are already black.
And this doesn't work
Let
with
me
every
ask-
locomotive, but it works on this one because it is like you're saying. I've already got a black painted grill
Let me
situation.
ask a question here. If you're going to use the panel line accent color wash and you're going to use Pan Pastels on the same car, is there any preferred order in which you apply them?
It depends upon the effect that you're after.
I knew you were going to give me a complicated answer.
Well, okay. In layers, what's inside your grills needs to be dark before dust lands on the outside of the locomotive itself.
Okay.
So for the first thing I would do, not on Walt's locomotive because Walt's locomotive is already black, but say for example my diesels, the overall color is Erie Lackawanna gray.
Okay.
This might not apply to a Norfolk Southern engine. This would definitely apply to CSX, Union Pacific, BNSF, almost not Penn Central because Penn Central was basically all black. Almost any locomotive that was not black, I would apply the black panel line wash to the grills first. Number one first, end of story.
Okay.
Then I would build the weathering over that based on the usage of the locomotive with Pan Pastels.
Okay.
So now on Walt's locomotive, I might tend to use kind of a mix between black and some dark gray to fade out the roof. And I would fade the roof out first with a dark gray color, and then I would put exhaust streaks up and down the roof in both directions, using a black color, starting at the smokestack, starting at the exhaust stack and headed out in both directions.
This is black Pan Pastel.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. For truck side frames, the truck side frames on my Railbox boxcar, I started first with the fuel stain wash, and then immediately on top of that, I put rust color Pan Pastels, and they're now locked in place. And my truck side frame really looks disgusting. And then I just got done adding some light gray to the surface of that. It dried, and I added some light gray to the top of that. And now I have a grimy, rusty truck side frame. You could
It's
do
dirty too.
it's dirty and rusty. In that case, you could use the wash and the Pan Pastels in either order.
Okay.
Now, on my on my Procore ethanol car, between the roof walks, or the man rays, because they're all lined in. Oh, I need to lower it down a little bit, because all of this is lined with very fine wire detail, and the actual detail for the manways and the clean out hatches and all that junk are all relatively fine detail. I decided this time, and this is the first time I've done it, I just completely abandoned the Pan Pastels and used the same color wash that I used to weather the car. And I think the effect is excellent.
Because
I-
the wash can get places the brush can't.
Exactly. And I just used the brush that came with the wash, just kind of slopped it on there. I was not very fussy about it. And then I went back. I used gray, and then I went back and used and added just a touch of the black panel line wash. And I'm impressed. I've never done that before, and I like it, and that's what I will do now, because I don't have to worry about beating up all of that fine wire detail with with a brush, with a Pan Pastel brush of any size. So I'm impressed.
Okay, so one of the things I just tried, if you can see it, working the ends. I'm just working the lower pilot. I put a little bit of rust just on the end of my wedge, and then I did the black to give it the dry look effect. Kind of faded in on the pilot. So this is the way a pilot looks brand new. This has got snowplow on it. So I'm gonna come in here, try to get it on just the edge, and I'm gonna kind of just run it along the edge of the snowplow. The hardest part I can't see. And then I'm gonna put a little bit of black in here. I dust a little bit off. Just kind of run it up in this plow. Put a little bit of gray. Then I'm gonna come back and add a little bit more black, and then I'm gonna put a little bit more rust with a downward stroke. Give it effect. I'm just trying to see. Yeah, that actually looks pretty good.
Let's see. That does look good.
It's hard to see probably on the camera, guys. I apologize. We're dealing with this kind of detail sometimes. It's see if I can kind of.
Yeah, that washes it out too much. There you go. If you have, that's better, and it does a better job of showing it.
And you can see the black plastic versus the black pilot, and it looks totally different. And I've already hit the nose with some weathering, so yeah, that quick, I don't want to overdo this locomotive, but I like it looking like it's been in service a little bit. So it's definitely toned down. Is what I was trying to do. So, and that's really what certain locomotives, Burlington Northern really ran them hard, but the pilots make a huge difference when you have a little bit of weather. And I ran a little bit of weathering on the fuel tanks as well, just kind of run it back over. Now remember, I used the drip to give it that one look with that greasy look, which will give it more of a shiny look from the diesel fuel, and then you got the other. Get it with this one. Just kind of tone it down.
I think that locomotive looks way better than just 10 or 15 minutes work there.
Yeah.
And I tried it with one of my Bachmann steam engines. I don't have any brass, so it wasn't expensive, but it's kind of like the tank car that you're showing there on the right side of the picture. We first started out, it was hard black and the details didn't show. And just putting a little bit something to make it lighter and a little bit of rust and soot made all the details and the rivets and the seams really pop on a steam engine.
It's amazing. Just a little bit of color and just accents, and then these Pan Pastels. One of the things I like is it gets down in that, like where these door hinges are and the door latches are, gets down in there where stuff just settles and oozes down over the years. So it's not really dirt per se. It's just weather over the years. It's just taking a toll, and it runs down inside all these things. So, and then I run it on the walkways as well a little bit, just kind of run the wedge down.
Yep.
But yeah, just a little bit, and all of a sudden I'm getting a little bit of an aged locomotive without overdoing it. I don't really want a heavy duty. I don't want my locomotive to look like it's on its last leg on the layout.
I heard somebody say this at one point, or I read it in a magazine at one point, and it applies. You do, and it was, this guy was weathering an armored vehicle, and he said you don't want your tank to look like it's had an accident in a cake mix factory. And if you overweather something, you can make your piece of equipment look like it's had an accident in a cake mix factory. And that phrase stuck with me, and I try to remember that. Now, there are those occasional cars that I will just beat the heck out of. And it's the effect that I want, because it's an older box car, and box cars beat up, gondolas get beat up, flat cars get beat up. But grain cars, maybe not so much. Ethanol cars, probably not so much at all. Cars that are in paper service, I would hope not, unless some idiot runs into the doors or the doorways with a forklift. And then you'd have rust.
Well,
And that's
down that
part of the
motherboard
stuff.
on that engine.
They really are rough on the equipment out there. It's it does get banged around at the plants, and different things occur. It's just there's not any,
But
different cars get treated different ways. So,
but I still try not to really trash out stuff usually.
right? No, I'm with you 100% on that.
Now, guys, I model L&N in about 1980. So the engines that have not been recently repainted are going to look like, well, they're going to look really bad.
Yes, L&M was neglected, so that's being nice.
Well, and that would be like that Rock Island equipment. When they finally got to the point of having the rock paint scheme, they were on their way out. They wanted to look colorful, but they didn't get any maintenance after that, and they looked horrible. And SP locomotives look that way. So yeah, you're, what is it, loser and nowhere?
L&M was on the way out till the family lines was created, and that kind of bought them time, but they still were having their troubles. So they were struggling railroad.
So your approach, I think, is good, Joe. Something that I wanted to point out. I started lightly weathering this structure. We talked about structures in the slide presentation a little bit. And I started to work on this structure, and then I stopped about halfway through down this side of it, so that you could see what I was headed towards. And this half of it, I just applied a little bit of black running down the side. I could probably apply some oxide rust or something, and that might blend it in a little bit better. This half of the building has not had any weathering to it, but what I did before I started any other things on this building, the first thing I did was spray paint the thing white. I pre-shaded the structure in white. And then I pulled out the appropriate brick color and sprayed it with the brick color, which has left lighter shading down towards the bottom. The light red, dark red that I sprayed on the upper portion of it more heavily, but more heavily is very relative, because it wasn't that heavy a coat. Filled in the upper surfaces of the brick, but the white left the mortar in it, and the effect is really cool. it's a process that people refer to as pre-shading. And the pre-shading of paint, the pre-shading with paint means that shadows and highlighted portions are painted before you actually start doing the painting of the kit and before you start weathering. And it's really an effective technique that armor modelers have been using for quite some time, which is where all of these washes come from. And now we're applying those in the model railroading hobby, and we're ending up with weathered equipment that looks like what armor modelers have been doing. I started using washes on my trains 20 years ago, but didn't have a really good technique for it until the wash stuff came out for the armor modelers, and I liked the technique a lot better, and I've rediscovered washing. And the panel line washes are really nice.
I tend to not want to shake the bottom of the washer because it makes it too thick.
You run that by us again, because you kind of.
I don't want to shake my panel line wash because it makes it too thick. I like it thinner. It runs into the cracks, and it doesn't. It's not as heavy of a color.
What
At
are you
least that's the way.
What are you using? Because you keep cutting out.
Panel line,
Yes.
stuff like that. I try. I don't want to shake it. It makes it more like paint.
Your microphone keeps cutting out, and all I got was panel line wash, and then you cut out again. I'm sorry.
Oh, so am I. I've had this problem in other Zoom meetings.
So you're using the
I'm
panel
also
line wash
having
because
trouble.
it's thinner?
So is it acrylic or is it a different type of base, oil base?
Oil.
Yeah, I think it's oil based.
So you could definitely thin it with something if you want to get it to run better. You want something to run a little
And
more.
that's
I don't find an issue with the panel line.
Okay.
wash. I find it's nice and thin.
Yeah, I never used it before till today.
Okay.
I really like the panel line wash. I started with medium gray, and then I've added light gray and dark gray or black, and I really like it because to me it is nice and thin.
Yeah, it really ran in the walkways and the meshes really well.
Yeah.
I'd never used it before till today, so I like the way it ran, and I just used it on this tank car, but it broke the whiteness of the tank car just enough where it looked like the black dirty boots were walking on it.
I would take the black, set your locomotive up straight, and I'd put just a little ring of it in each one of your grills.
Yeah.
Use this.
Use the dark one.
Yep. Use the black.
All right, give it a try.
I would, and I'd put some in the exhaust stack as well. Just let it flow in, and that's it, and quit. That just let it flow in. That's it. Quit. And then do the same, 3 or 4 strokes in there. Quit. The same thing in the next radiator fan. It doesn't take painting it in, because then you'll get too much, but just kind of let it flow in so it gets into the grills, and then that's it. And that's it.
Okay.
And let it sit. And then once that's dry, do the same thing. Turn your locomotive
Radiator.
on its side, sort of, and start at the tops of the radiators and let it run down,
Okay.
and then stand it up and let it completely settle. I really like the effect.
And this is a scale trains SD40-2. This was their operator series, not their
Rivet counter.
series. So I didn't mind doing stuff to this one, and I was going to do something to it. So it's kind of neat to try things out on it today.
Yeah.
Turned out
Gary,
good.
Yes,
Turned out
sir.
real good.
I have a question going back. When you did the wheels, you had a color. What was that color?
You were using this, weren't you? Fuel stains.
Well,
The chocolate brown.
yeah, I started with the gray color and hated it. So I ended up using this same fuels. Now, well, it's in the picture in the PDF. It's the fuel stain color.
Okay.
And rail towel brown is a good one too.
I don't know if you can.
Okay.
That's what it is. It's AK. It's AK. It's AK. Um. AK interactive fuel stains, and I just used a little. Where'd it go? Here it is. I just used a little micro brush. One of these little. Well, let me pick up the package because it's easier. I use these little generic applicators.
Oh yes, those are
And
wonderful.
And I pulled the wheel sets out, and I put a little bit of that stuff in this little cup, and I just dipped my brush into it and just went yip around the inside of the wheel set, and I set them down to dry.
Yeah.
Now they're kind of gunky brown. I don't know that they show up here. They may not show up well, and I haven't weathered the trucks yet. But if you could, I'll hand it to Walt. Now the wheels are kind of gunky brown.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, where did you get that? Because I can't seem to find it.
I bought it at I bought this at Hobbytown.
I bought mine at Blue Ox.
Hobbytown?
Yep.
I got mine at Blue Ox. He can get it.
Oh, okay.
And you can also order it from Amazon. These are all they're all military armor, all military armor finishing.
Yeah.
The panel line washes are actually originally aircraft washes, like 1/72 and 1/32 and one 144th scale aircraft stuff, but the armor modelers now use the panel line washes for panel lines. And that's what Walt was doing, using the panel line wash on his battery box doors. And then the panel line wash is also very effective for grills because it settles down into the grill, leaves whatever the body color is up on the top, but it flows so thin. It's so thin, it just flows down into the grill. You don't use a ton of it. You use just enough so that it flows down into the grill area and fills everything underneath it with black. So it gives it depth. And then I used it on the around the roof walks or above the roof walk and on the manways of this tank car. First, I did a light gray color and then a wash, and then I did the black wash over it to give it a little bit of grime, because to me the light gray was just a hair too stark. And the top of that tank car now looks perfect. It matches the rest of the car, which is faded gray a little bit.
Yeah.
Because it's a relatively new car and it hauls ethanol, and the industry itself polices those cars. Although I could probably cover it in graffiti, and there wouldn't be much I could do with it. But
Yeah. Most of the time they don't look too bad. They keep those pretty neat looking actually.
Perry, can I put in a plug for Kennesaw Hobbytown?
I just did, so I don't know. I don't. You should be able to.
There's a guy there named Kevin with a mustache.
Yep.
Yeah.
Who knows everything there is to know about military modelers, painting and weathering and
Yep.
putty and glue.
He is sharp.
Yep. And if you're in Virginia, you can find the same sort of thing up there.
Yeah, Kevin, I agree with you, Joe. Kevin is really, he knows a lot about the products and what works with what, and he'll teach you a lot if you just 5 minutes in the store with him.
If you want another thing, if you want to learn some just watch in high detail in color, so higher detail than we can show you now. It's not interactive like we can do, but if you want to see some of the use of washes and pin washes and stuff like that, on YouTube, there is a guy who, Andy's Hobby Headquarters. If you look up Andy's Hobby Headquarters on YouTube, he does a lot of model building. A fair amount of it is armor modeling, but he does cars and motorcycles and stuff like that. He's done some 1/35th scale railroad equipment, which was really cool. But that's where I've been spending a fair amount of time learning washes and what I teach now. So that's a suggestion too. But if you're in this area of the planet and you go to Hobbytown in Kennesaw and talk to Kevin, you'll be. It's a good place. It's a good place.
It's a good resource. Excellent resource.
Yep. But I've done more with washes today than I have on any other cars, and I'm very pleased with the effect that I got on the roof of my tank car. I'm really pleased.
Something I didn't bring any steam locomotives. I don't know if any of y'all do steam locomotives and weathering. All this stuff works great, but a lot of times you've got to use a piece of styrene and use it kind of like a jig around the drop downs on the top of the main boiler, and you want to create those little wedges or streaks, and you kind of shield them. You can use the Pan Pastels, but you got to shield them so you don't rub them off onto something else, because there's usually so many detail parts. But a piece of styrene will give you that fine, thin line where you don't rub it all over the place. And then you can drop down like you got something dropping from the pop valve on the top, and you can run it down the side of the boiler and use the Pan Pastels on that as well. So steam locomotives and Pan Pastels are great color effects, because the boilers, typically a black boiler after time had that gray faded look. Yep. And then you had rust streaks here and there all over the locomotive, and it also helps highlight the bolt patterns and stuff like that, which is also great on bridges and things as well, to bring the highlights of the bolt patterns out.
Yep. Rivets or bolts, or both.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Perry,
not right.
Perry, you mentioned Andy's Hobby Headquarters. There's another guy that on YouTube that I've found is very helpful. He specializes sort of in building structures, but he talks about all the weathering techniques, and he uses a lot of Pan Pastels. His name is Jason Jensen. Jason Jensen Trains, and it's Jensen. He has like 24,000 subscribers, and he is building a small basement full of railroad that probably has like 100 structures. Every one of them is a kit bash or a craftsman or something, but he tries to make it simple that the average person can do it too.
Cool. Well, that's what I'm doing on this building. I've done on this wall. I've done a layer of, well, I did first the layer of white, and then I did the layer of dark red for the brick. Then I did a layer of black pan pastels, and then I went back in and used a layer of iron oxide red, and that's this wall of the building. And I'm going to go and I'll go back and do the same thing on the back wall of the building before I'm done, or now. And I'm very pleased with the results. And it's taken me, well, here's 30 seconds of, oops, and move it back into the picture. There's about 30 seconds worth of fading out the, or kind of blending the white in, and that's an improvement. And then I need to go off and get some of the oxide red to blend all of that in. And I'm really pleased with the results. I have weathered I have weathered buildings with Pan Pastels before. Almost every building on my railroad is, but I hadn't brought one to a clinic before, so I thought I'd bring one with me this time, just so I could, whoops.
So you need something to get in the grooves with a brick.
Well, the white has done that, but now I've kind of obliterated it on this end. But on this side, I did not.
Oh, yeah, it needs a little something to highlight the grooves. I mean, it looks good, but it does need a little dark, something dark, where the border lines are a little more.
Yeah. I wonder if a wash, a really light wash, would do that.
I tell you what else I've done over the years. I've used an oil based, like a burnt sienna, and put a little. I've actually used turpentine and mix it, and then I take a dry brush, hit the oils with the turpentine, and then create a wash like on box cars, and it'll give like a rusty wash on it, and then you just thin it out with the turpentine real quick, and then it evaporates. It is a little fumy, so if you're doing something like that, either work outside or work with a ventilator or something. If you don't, you won't like the smell of that turpentine after a little while. It'll get pretty strong on you. So
there are a collection of armor modelers who use odorless turpentine and sit in their homes and do that, and it does the same thing.
yeah. I still have a bottle of turpentine, so it's gone a long ways. Gone a long ways over the years. So
Now, if I just set that and let it just sit there for a bit.
any questions, anybody?
Any other questions or pass-throughs before we, because it's almost 4 o'clock.
Nope.
Gary, how you doing there? You still there? Gary still with us?
Gary's
Still
in the
here.
office.
How's that car coming?
A few. I actually took out a bright white Trident and made it so it looks actually that it had been on the rails for a while. Some of these
Okay.
Yeah.
old cheap cars I've got a whole bunch I was given by some patients of life likes. I did this one. It was a bright orange, and it's now looks like it actually could go on the rails.
Very
And
good.
then this one, after I'd worked on it, it comes out much better at this point.
Oh,
So
yeah, much better.
they're it's coming along.
Very
Good deal.
cool.
Good deal. It's just nice
This
to see
is-
everybody use them.
Wendy,
This is
how
John.
are-
I have another question.
Oh, yes, sir. Speak.
This would be so much fun, I think, for the scouts. We used to do programs before the COVID with scouts. Have we ever done one of these clinics for the scouts?
We did scenery for the scouts. We had a couple of scouts in structure building. We had a couple of scouts in structure building, but it wasn't a scout offered program. They just registered and came. Um, but we can't do scouts anymore.
Oh,
They can come as individuals to
Yep.
things like this,
Yep.
whether we're doing them in person with adult supervision,
Yes.
and we can't
Okay.
offer a direct program.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
if you know a scout group and the training camp in July is going to be building a laser cut wood kit, and the excuse me, and the training camp in September is going to be scenery. And if you haven't been part of the module building process that we started last year, but didn't work, I mean, it worked well, we just ran out of time. We're going to continue it this year, but if you don't have a module, we will produce kits that people can use to practice their own scenery. So if you know a group, they cannot come as a troop, but the individual scouts can register and come.
Okay. Thank you.
They just have to have parental supervision. But we were headed in that direction and had to quit, sadly.
Well, one of the things that I've noticed is the NMRA has really stepped up in our division. Probably is one of the leaders in it of the webinars full feature. I think it's a great way to reach existing and potential new members and even young folks, which we want to get more in the hobby. I think it's great.
That's why our division meetings are all online, and why our training camps well, let's see.
And the other thing is too, John, that most of our clinics have been posted back to our YouTube channel, and they're visible on YouTube as well after the fact. So our viewership is really strong on our YouTube channel. We've really gotten a lot of viewers between the layouts and the clinics. It's been strong. So.
Yeah. And even when we go back to working in public, since I get to say so, we're going to continue to record our clinics and put them online.
Yay.
Yes.
That's great. Any ideas when we might go back to person meetings at the church, or is that still a possibility?
It is. The church has started allowing its own functions to occur. We're thinking that they will allow fall, and our next scheduled what would be an in-person event would be September. June
That's
we're
great.
having June we are having a virtual clinic, and it's going to be 3D printing. July, since July normally we don't have a regular function meeting, we're going to have the picnic. And then August, the Colorado State Model Railroad Museum is presenting, and that's a lot easier to do online.
And that is an awesome railroad. I think everybody really enjoyed that.
Yep.
Michelle Kemper is going to do it. Does a great job. It is phenomenal railroad.
And September, our September clinician says he really needs to do his presentation on in person. So September will be our first in-person event, in-person meeting.
I'm in the James River Division, and we're going to try one in July.
Very good.
It's good to hear.
Yeah. Actually, our first in-person will be our picnic, so that'll be in July. So that's a good.
Yeah.
That sounds about the same.
You know, it's funny how we could definitely do an in person. It's basically our facilities is what's holding us up now.
Yep.
I think most of our members would come in attendance in a heartbeat, but it's the church venue we use is they've been real reluctant to start up, and they're actually in the metro part of Atlanta, so it's been difficult. So we're getting
just
there.
to give you
that's for
guys
sure.
an idea, for future, our little group, which is the Jasper Roundhouse that Phil said, and we have about 25 people in that in the northwest Atlanta. But we've been working with a gentleman named Sam Miller who lives up in the LJ area, I believe, and he has really gotten into cardstock modeling, and it's just another way to getting a very detailed, three-dimensional looking. It's not the two like.
Well, he's the one I was telling you about on Thursday.
He's very interested in doing this, so it might be would there be an opportunity he could do a presentation at some future thing or whatever.
That might be interesting. We'll have to get his contact information and forward it on to Sally Bando and see about maybe
Okay, I can
scheduling
send
him
that
at
to
some
Sally.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we must not forget about the train show in October.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
We're
guys in
going to have a
Virginia
great
looking for a
train
road
show
trip.
October 1st, 2nd, and 3rd in Cartersville, and everybody should come because it's going to be a great show.
Yeah, you guys in Virginia, come on down.
Road trip.
It's fun.
That is a bit of a drive.
It is.
But it's fun.
If you leave
I've
by
been
midnight, you get there
to
by
3
10.
events so far. I've been driving around going to different stuff. It's fun to get out and go see some stuff. So,
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Anybody else before we?
did we lose Wendy?
No. Well,
No.
no.
Oh,
She's
still
still
there?
there.
Okay. Too quiet.
I'm still here.
Oh, good deal. Did this help you out some?
Oh yeah, this is my first time ever working with Pan Pastels, so this has been great.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Yes, mine too.
Good.
Well, that's what it's about.
Wendy,
Everybody you get something out of it, and learn, and take it to the next level, and experiment with it. And hopefully, it'll,
In a relatively safe environment.
Yeah. And that's one of the nice things about this. If you don't want to buy an airbrush or something like that, it's a lot less expensive than buying airbrush equipment and not having to deal with all that equipment. So,
Yep. Yeah, it's a good it's a good,
it's an
not
alternative.
horribly expensive method for learning to weather quickly and effectively. It looks good, so that helps.
Yeah, it's a nice finished product. It's not just an option. It's a viable
It's a
option.
viable option, yes.
Yeah.
For sure. So
Everything running around on my railroad is weathered with Pan Pastels. And now washes.
Biggest problem.
Yes, picking up the washes was a good portion.
Was it what?
It was a good addition into the Pan Pastels, the washes.
Yes. Thank you. I think it really adds to the modeling and the weathering.
The biggest problem lately has been buying Tamiya TS80. So many people have been out of it.
Yeah, I'm almost out, and I'm relying right now on Mr. Hobby Flat, and that's nice stuff, but it's not cheap.
No.
I really like the Mr. Hobby Flat finish.
well, I know all these factories are affected, so it's making it hard to get some of this stuff.
Well, and people are buying it because
People are buying it.
because they couldn't go anywhere else.
Bought up the supplies. Yeah, there's been a lot happened in the hobby in the last couple of months. So yeah, it's been busy for sure. So,
Well,
yeah, this
Terry
is
and
a good
Walt,
type of clinic.
everybody-
This is a good clinic to get a lot of hands-on, learn stuff, but fairly easy.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
Perry and Walt, I was just going to say thank you. It is really good clinic, and thank you for figuring out why I got sick for 2 or 3 weeks after
Oh,
using too much chalk dust. But now I've learned and I'm ready to go back to it. So thank you.
Very good.
I have to drop off, but Good presentation.
Yeah, you might cut back those 100 cars at a time.
Yeah, not 100 cars and low quantities of Pan Pastels at one time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yes, sir.
Thank y'all for attending.
Thank you.
Barry and Walt, thank you very much.
Y'all
Yes,
welcome, everybody. Have a happy
Wonderful.
Memorial Day
Thanks, guys.
weekend.
What's my other